Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Ask Ancap. This is episode 22, and what a great show it's going to be today because we've got an excellent lineup here. Joining us again as guest hosts are both Adrian Shepard and Floppa from the Base of True channel, and we're really excited to have everybody here. Hopefully, that means we're going to have a lot of perspective and the maximum amount of expertise to throw towards every single bit of question. Now, we do have some calls lined up. It's going to take me a little while today to get that sorted. We got lots of people in the call queue already. So while I'm focusing on that, you're going to get some great answers from these guys. And just to warm up, we're going to start with some text questions to get answered. Now, I had been answering these questions in order. As you know, some of these answers, some of the questions that have been posed to us are several weeks late now, just from how back our questions submitted log is. But let's see. Let's go back to the beginning. A couple from just a couple weeks ago. We've got a question here from Sophie. If your neighbor leaves his garbage on his property, but the odor starts permeating over to your property as well, is that considered aggression? What if you're sitting next to somebody who absolutely reeks and their smell ends up sticking to your clothes? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, so I believe odor is like a physical property of just like existence. So if you have something that necessarily transfers from your property to their property to a degree that upsets the other owner, I definitely think that can at some point be considered some type of aggression. And I think this is also something that you can pretty easily mediate with another person. Like, hey, would you mind, moving your garbage to another location? This is um, this is bothering me. I like to keep my windows open, and I keep smelling your garbage. So uh, at at some point, I think there would be you would be legally allowed to take necessary steps to be like, hey, same for like if you leave your car on, right, and you have like a diesel truck, and the smoke just permeates into the other person's house. I would consider that aggression personally.
It's interesting. I think it sounds like the direction we're going here is that being smelly on the bus is a subcategory of pollution forensics. What do you guys think, Zulu and Adrian?
Yeah, so to kind of elaborate on that, Rothbard has this great discussion on pollution in the Libertarian Manifesto, I believe it is. You can find the whole thing on Mises.org. Just look up the Libertarian Manifesto on pollution. So, like, yeah, in general, this would be dealt with as sort of a tort, that is like one of these like sort of nuisance crimes. The example he gives is like a factory that pumps out smoke, and then some of the soot gets onto a little old lady's laundry as it's out to dry, and then it becomes dirty. And you could absolutely sue the factory, get an injunction against them, so they can no longer pollute you, and they pay to replace your clothes or get them dry cleaned or whatever. And that was an actual thing that happened, and so they had to install these special filters to stop them from polluting. It strikes me that the same type of thing could be done against other sorts of pollution. Now, of course, this wouldn't apply if there was a landfill in some area, and you decide, I'm going to move in next to that landfill. And you say, hey, landfill, it's really stinky over here. It's like, well, yeah, duh. The stink was already there. We've already homesteaded that level of stink. If you don't want it, then don't move next to a landfill. But yeah, if it's like some new imposition upon you, then it could be counted as form of pollution.
Very good. Well, I got to say, I think that's a pretty comprehensive, that's a complete answer to that question. Adrian, I'm denying you the opportunity to answer that question because we've got a caller online already, and I'm going to put the ball immediately into your court. Soren, you're on the line. Can you hear me? Hello, sir.
Yep. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. All right, we got you. Perfect. So, just a little background for everybody. Soren has called in a couple
Yo,
weeks ago.
yo.
I
Can
think
you hear me?
We can. Can you hear us? Hmm. All right. Well, I'll just give a little background while Soren get that figured out. I think we got some one way on the audio there. Soren has called in a few weeks ago, and he was talking to us about the rightfulness with which we apply the label anarchy to ourselves. So, as you know, we're representing the anarcho-capitalist position here, and well, half of that is anarchy. We brought Adrian on specifically for this today because Adrian has a video, a wonderful video. I'll link that video in the description this week, just like I did in the previous time it was mentioned. It's a great, what should I say, an expose on the justified use of this label for ourselves. I don't want to jump into the conversation too much while Soren gets that figured out. I want to give him the chance to put forward his argument before we respond to it. So why don't we take another text question to distract everybody from the temporary technical issues. Okay, here's a short one. What metric do you use to gauge how much of the remnant has been gathered? When do you think it will be time to start speaking French? And what will the movement look like after such a point? Zulu, that's another one for you.
So yeah, I'm not going to advise people on when to start speaking French, especially not on this platform. But I will say the metrics you use to gauge, it's not necessarily like a specific, we've gathered 10% of the remnant, we've gathered 15% of the remnant. It's not something specific like that. It's more, the question is, are you continuing to gather the remnant? Are you continuing to gather up these people who are going to be important for the political change? It's mostly about which direction are you going in rather than which specific part are you on the spectrum. Because I don't think it's important to know that necessarily. And it's also going to be perhaps impossible to quantify.
Oh, I think that's very reasonable. Does anyone else here have thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an oh, sorry. I'll let Adrian speak since he didn't get to last time.
I was just going to say, if we're going to talk about like Leninist language, maybe it's useful to kind of think about like where the Bolsheviks were at the beginning of the 20th century, just in the sense of like, does the average person, or maybe just the average factory worker or urban dweller, think about the ideas that they represented? Now, 50 years before, say 1900 or 1905, if we want to put a solid date on it, the idea that society should be organized for the benefit of all people, specifically like the proletariat, the state directs the economy for the benefit of people, not for nobles, not for the czar. This would obviously, I mean, it was almost a safe position because you would just get laughed at. You could say that at a party and people would call you an eccentric intellectual. As these ideas got more popular, it starts to become a threat, but it becomes obvious if you have, which I'm sure everyone has had conversations with parents, with friends, with family, strangers, about the ideas that you believe in and how seriously they take it, how reasonable they think it is a position to have. You can sort of gauge the temperature in the society which you live in. In 1917, it was very, very unpopular to be supportive of the nobles and the czar. It was a disastrous war. New ideas were definitely being looked at more. So the idea that you were going to shift society from a very hierarchical society to a very, on paper, very egalitarian, socialistic, modern, science-based society had a lot more cachet. And the Bolsheviks knew that they had become far more popular, at least in urban areas and among factory workers, than they had been in the previous 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. So the same thing would apply to libertarian ideas.
I think that's a great answer. Floppa, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention just kind of a fun, thought-provoking hypothetical. If, like, let's say everyone in the federal government of the United States became Ancap, and then, all of a sudden, just didn't come to their jobs. You know, I guess that's kind of separate from the remnant question as a whole, but like, uh, you know, I would assume that we all of a sudden just wouldn't have, you know, this central authority anymore, and things would kind of start to manifest differently within society, without, I guess, these strict regulations and pretty much everything else that goes along with it. So, uh, sorry, I kind of thought of that question and then didn't really think too much further into it. I just want to add that hypothetical into people's minds.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think that's a really thoughtful question, and we got some good answers there, particularly like Adrian's um, perspective there on where the Bolsheviks were and how that should inform us on what we're thinking about the remnant. If I had anything to say, I would just say, with regard to quantifying our progress in terms of collecting the remnant and how many people we're reaching, I don't think there's any inherent harm in it, but don't let the quantification of that sort uh, tempt you into the black pill. I've had conversations with people sometimes who they hear the numbers that we're putting up in various areas and they get sort of pessimistic. But whatever the case may be, especially with Ancap in particular, it's certainly an upward trend across the board, I would say. Let's take a look at a super chat that we just brought in here. Hope you're all doing well. Good to see you all again. And we'll have to tune in after work. From Griffin1, one of the biggest supporters on the channel, seriously keeping the lights on around here. So grateful. Think it may be worth trying to get more mainstream Republican types on the show. Well, that's a really interesting question. I think certainly all four of us are rubbing shoulders from time to time with some of those types. I want to know what you guys think about some of our libertarian adjacent types of allies. I know that there's sort of I don't want to call it a wave, but there's a trend that can't be denied in libertarianism right now towards a sort of a minarchist position. And I think they manifest a lot of the time in saying, like, I think all of us probably know at least one person who says, instead of being a libertarian, we should, at least politically, we should try to become parts of the Republican Party and change them to be more libertarian. That's been my encounter with those types. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty worthwhile because it doesn't take long talking to that sort of person before you start finding some serious flaws in their reasoning and their understanding of the philosophy. You know, for instance, I remember one year I was at YALCON, Young Americans for Liberty conference, and I was talking to this guy there who was like, you know, like a Republican minarchist type of person. I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I remember that is, I don't remember the exact flow of it or anything. You know, this was a few years ago, of course. But he was really not keeping up particularly well. You can, these people, like, they don't in general have any sort of strong philosophy from which they derive their political stances. It's just kind of like a grab bag of different positions that they came across here and there. And if somebody's not acting on standard, if they're just kind of acting, you know, in this grab bag method, well, that becomes quite easy to find out and then unseat. And you're just like, well, I mean, you know, why aren't you thinking in principles here? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? This is just, you know, cherry picking.
Good answer. What about you guys, Adrian and Flappa?
Well, just going off what Zulu said, I think it's important to remember that conservatism is not actually an ideology, which does make it a lot easier to make arguments to them that they don't have solid, principled opposition to. I don't think there's anything wrong with certainly inviting people on to debate or have discussions about that. But, you know, the only thing I would say is, unfortunately, there's some, like, for example, the Reason podcast, Reason interviews or whatever. Oftentimes they will have friendly interviews with center left or center right people. And I understand why they don't want to, like, be too hard on these people. But on the other hand, there's often very, very little pushback. So I would say if you're going to have that, and there's nothing wrong with that in particular, but if you're going to have that, don't have it just be softballs all day. You got to actually intellectually challenge them about some aspect of their ideology, which is flawed.
Great.
Yeah, I would say that at least a lot of the Republicans I've talked to appeal to the Constitution a lot. So, kind of my strategy when I'm talking to the, the God-loving American types, I like challenging them specifically on the principles of the Constitution because I believe they're a good starting place. That's pretty general, but like the First Amendment, for example, like you have the freedom to act and to say what you believe as long as it's not a form of aggression, right? Like we can find a lot of overlap in that area, but then I would start then challenging them on let's say well, I guess we can even say like there's overlap in like the Eighth Amendment too, where it's like I believe it's ban harsh punishments, unfair fines, or whatever. Like that kind of speaks to our position of like equal restitution in a lot of ways. So I feel like if you can first establish like, hey, we're not that dissimilar, but here's my principles and here's why the Constitution isn't just this absolute thing that it is we should like morally or legally follow. So
it's also worth pointing out on that front that the Constitution itself says that the Constitution isn't giving people rights, which some constitutionalists think it does. But it's very clear if you read the Ninth Amendment, it says that the enumeration of certain rights in this document, I can't remember the exact phrasing, does not disparage other rights held by the people. So that's directly saying, hey, like we're just enumerating certain rights that we think people have. We're not saying that this is an exhaustive list or anything like that of the sort. And you see this throughout the rest of the amendment as well. What does the Second Amendment says? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's not saying we're giving this right. It's already an existing right. Congress shall not abridge the freedom of speech. Right? They thought that these were already existing rights that people held. Right? So the Constitution itself is a natural law document. It's not a perfect natural law document. There are improvements that can be made over it. They hadn't quite identified the natural law as well as, for instance, Murray Rothbard did much later. But they still are trying to present this as a natural law document. So you can immediately shut down any constitutionalist who thinks that the Constitution is like the be-all and end-all of rights, because the Constitution itself disagrees with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, you said that much better than I was. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for your insight on the matter. And thanks again for our super chatter, not only for the super chat, but for the insightful question. Now, we are going to return to our caller who is back with us there. Soren, you're on the line. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Loud and clear.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect.
I had said before, just a really quick intro, Soren has called in before, and the topic was on whether or not we're justified in applying the anarchist label. Now, for this particular conversation, Soren, I'm going to primarily pair you up with Adrian Shepard here, who's on the line with us. But by the end of the conversation, if it's all right with you, we'll probably invite some input from our other hosts here, Floppa and Liquid Zulu.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
Awesome. All right. Well, the floor is yours. Why don't you share your argument with us, and we can start there.
Yeah, so my initial argument, which I made 2 weeks ago, I think, was that anarcho-capitalism is not anarchist. anarchism has been historically defined as a statelessness and classlessness, and you can't really have classes in a capitalist society. Now, that aside, I also pointed to the fact that historical anarchists were socialists, and anarchism as a whole historically has been a socialist movement. Uh, you know, and Zulu, he mentioned Proudhon as well, which he called a quote unquote proto anarchist. And Proudhon, from what I know, defined anarchism as a absence of a master or sovereign. And on top of that, one of his most famous works were "Property is Theft!" Explanation point. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the first anarchists and anarchist movements were inherently socialist.
Great. Well, that was super concise. Thanks so much. Adrian,
Yeah.
I think you're ready to take it from here.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's start with Proudhon, who is normally considered at least the first self-identified anarchist. It's a little more complicated than that, but we can start from there. So Proudhon did say property is theft. He also said property is liberty. This is a guy who talks in a not the clearest way, because he comes from a tradition that is not very precise in the way, like there's not really like a treatise on mutualism from Proudhon himself. Regardless, it is important to get his position, right? Mutualism is certainly what could be called and what was called socialism. What is socialism? What was socialism in the 19th century? Socialism, as defined by Proudhon and defined by previous thinkers, was any ideology which sought to alleviate what was called the social question. What is the social question? It's the problem primarily of urban, but probably generally speaking, this could be applied to all of society, general or urban poverty, the rising class of the proletariat, as Marx called it, workers who were making their living with wages, how to deal with this large destitute or near destitute class that was arising in the Western world. Socialism was a very, very, very broad umbrella. Proudhon did not agree with Marx, did not agree with Bakunin, did not agree with Tucker. It is even probably fair to say that you could maybe stretch the ideologies of the 20th century, like National Socialism, like even anarcho-capitalism. Everyone because this is socialism is attempting to solve the social question. The only ideology that was not attempting to solve the social question was conservatism, was monarchism. Like socialism, just saying, oh, he was a socialist, therefore X or Y. Now, certainly ANCAPs don't identify as socialists. But if you ask an anarchist what we should do with the poor, or an ANCAP rather, they may jokingly say something funny to, like, who cares about the poor? But really, Rothbard and many anarcho-capitalist thinkers have sought to use a anarcho-capitalist society to promote welfare for working people, all people. Not to get too much on that tangent. Proudhon, it sounded like you don't know that much about mutualism. Now, when you're talking about a stateless society, or sorry, he certainly advocated a stateless society, at least for most of his life. When you're talking about a classless society, I think this is where the water gets a little muddy. Proudhon did not dispute that people should be unequal ceteris paribus. That is, that some people might be richer, might be poorer. He was concerned in the mechanism that people made their fortunes. And he thought, generally speaking, he wanted a more egalitarian society, a more horizontal society. But he did not think small shopkeepers, he did not think smallholder farmers were aggressing against people that did not have that resource, say their farm hands or their employees, because they were acquiring that property in what he saw as a just way that fit the mutualist idea of society. This is something that non-Proudhonist anarchists in Europe at the time did not like. They did not like that it was not quite a stateless society. Bakunin and Proudhon were not friends. Bakunin called Proudhon a bourgeois capitalist, even though, of course, Proudhon would scoff at that. But that, like, anarcho-communists have long not gotten along for this very reason, that, like, you are charging ANCAPs for not being anarchists. ANCOMs are levying this charge against the first anarchists. Benjamin Tucker was called, and he's another. We'll talk about him more later, I think. But just quickly, the anarcho-communist guerrilla leader Nestor Makhno during the 1920s, he disparaged Benjamin Tucker, who was an individualist, mutualist anarchist from America, in the same basic ways, that he's a bourgeois capitalist. They believe in the petty bourgeoisie should hold the whip hand over the worker, blah, blah, blah. So simply rejecting a fully egalitarian society is something that you can levy against mutualism too. So, I mean, you could say, oh, ANCOMs are the only real anarchists, but then we're losing this idea. Well, it's like, well, if the first anarchist says something that they're socialist, then therefore we have to listen to them. I think that argument falls apart on that basis then.
Soren, this will be just a back and forth at this point, unless we need to jump in. So feel free to respond as you see fit to that.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say that I only mentioned Proudhon because Zulu mentioned him in our first back and forth, quote unquote. And when he has works such as Property is Theft, or whatever, I don't think you can really call that capitalist, right? And that's my first step towards why capitalism is or why anarchism can't be capitalist. That's first. And also all of the other movements, such as you mentioned Bukakin, the first international, why they split, it was because it was between the two groups of Bukakinists and Marxists, which Bukakin was a skeptic of a state, and then Bukakin or Marx wanted a transitional stage or whatever, but we're not really here to talk about that. And so realistically, my point is that anarcho-capitalism, it's a 20th century invention that seeks to claim the validity of a political movement that has had so much history and theory behind it, aka anarchism, and giving it its own definition. Bukhakin, Proudhon described it as the absence of a master or sovereign. Bukhakin, he also said it is the negation of authority, and he was a collectivist. He didn't like capitalism and such. So you look at these big historically anarchist figures, and you look at their movements and their ideologies, and they're all socialists and they're all leftists. And you look at anarcho-capitalism, and well, the name is self-explanatory, right? So realistically, you cannot slap the name of capitalism onto anarchism.
Right. Well, first, I just want to say, let's get this out of the way. It's you're referring to Bakunin, right? The anarcho-communist thinker, not how you were saying Bukhakin. Bakunin.
I was saying, yeah.
Okay. Let's go with this claim. All these anarchists from the days of yore were leftist, quote unquote, and anarcho-communists or anarcho-capitalists cannot be anarchists because we are not leftists. Now, there's a very good essay by Murray Rothbard called Left and Right Prospects for Liberty. In it, he posits that, classical liberalism, the traditional left wing of political history, the anti-monarchists, the anti-nobility, the anti-protectionists, that the classical liberal does sit on the left as we did in the French Assembly during the French Revolution. We stand against masters. We stand against this hierarchical society that's being enforced by soldiers and tanks and artillery. The coercive society of the right, of conservatism, of the rule of kings.
Just quick question, like jumping
yes.
here. My bad. When you refer to the French Revolution, which one are you referring to?
The one that started in 1789, the first one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Classical liberals did continue to sit. For example, Frederick Bastiat and Proudhon both sat on the left side of the chamber of the assembly, because both identified against the establishment, against the monarchy, against absolutism. Indeed, bringing up these two, there's a famous collection of letters between Bastiat, who is considered among libertarians, classical liberals, and ANCAPs in general, a very important figure in the natural rights, laissez-faire tradition. He and Proudhon had a series of letters between them, and certainly they did not agree on a lot. But these, if you read them, and I encourage you to, this is a debate between two men who believe in liberty, trying to figure out how a free society would look like, how it would look, how it would function, and how to figure out which property is justified. Not that property itself is unjust, because, like I said, Proudhon polemically said property is theft. He said property is liberty. He said property is impossible. He said a lot of things. Mutualism does not say that property cannot exist. If you look into what it is, what people believe about it, he's against absentee ownership. He's against the issuance of money on credit. He doesn't believe in rent as a concept. These are the things he had a problem with capitalism for, not the right of private people to generate an income from what they created, what they owned. But Bastiat and Proudhon, both members of the left, by that standard, by Rothbard's standard, I believe this was written in 1965, Rothbard did not necessarily see himself as a man of the right. He saw himself as part of the grand liberal tradition, which ultimately Marxism, anarchism, etc., all comes from this anti-conservative, anti-hierarchical tradition. So just saying ANCAPs are, because we have the name capitalist in our name, not necessarily even something that a lot of ANCAPs are even comfortable. I say ANCAPs as a useful turn of phrase. Lots of people have different ways of presenting. Free market anarchism, right? Laissez-faire anarchism, something like that. Private governance. Like, you don't have to say capitalism. Usually people do that literally because it seems like people get the wrong impression when you say capitalism, because they're thinking of like capitalism as it exists in our society, which is propped up by the state, etc. I don't think it is necessarily clear to me that there is a right side of the political spectrum that anarcho-capitalism sits on, and a left that other anarchists sit on. I think that term is very fluid, and it really depends on who you're talking to.
So just to clarify here, when you say ANCAP, anarcho-capitalism, what mode of production are you promoting specifically for the sake of this argument?
Yeah, private ownership of the means of production. I'm sure you're familiar with anarcho-capitalists as like, basically we want no state, and then people are able to own things and produce things. Other people can work for wages for these people, etc.
Yeah, so when ownership is private, and so you have two classes of people, right? You have the class that owns the means of production, and then you have the other class that works, right? From what I'm understanding. So in this specific scenario, you kind of have authority over you. Who's the person, let's say, for the sake of the argument, that you're a worker and you're working in a factory. The person who has power over you is your factory owner, your boss, your whatever, right? So whenever you're talking about the private ownership of the means of production, how can that ever be applied to anarchism?
Well, like we were talking about, the idea that mutualism is a classless society is, I think, also a bit not clear to me, because Pardon did not say that all private property had to be abolished. So it's not quite as a Marx, like what Marx would have said, the private ownership of the means of production in like some kind of like fully formed state, but mutualism does have private property. So by that metric, mutualists aren't anarchists either. And I think this starts to become semantically problematic, because it seems like the only true anarchists are these latecomers that are claiming everyone else is actually they're fakers.
Okay, well, mutualism. Okay. So let's just not mention mutualism here for the sake of it, right? If that is true, because I haven't really done my homework about mutualism or Proudhon that much, but if that really is true, I wouldn't classify mutualism as a anarchist, anarchist ideology either, because if you have private ownership over the means of production, which is what we're debating here, I'm not really opening the can of worms, which is private property. But if that is true, then I don't believe that it is anarchist either, because you clearly have a hierarchy or structure in your workplace.
Well, I mean, I would say, okay, so I would say that I think there's a problem with saying that like hierarchy is baked in to the idea of anarchism, like in itself. Like Benjamin Tucker said, like equality if we can get it, but liberty in any case. Talking about statelessness, the abolition of coercive control is far more important, takes priority over the idea of an egalitarian economic situation. I understand what you're talking about when you're saying like, oh, are you really the master of yourself if you have to work for a wage? I'm sure Zulu can argue with you about that philosophical question. Um, it is not clear to me, actually reading even anarcho-communists, for example, like Emma Goldman, that they saw it as inseparable from the statelessness. Like they kind of saw these two things as two major problems. Now, ANCOMs wanted both, and they refused Tucker's idea of like liberty if we can get it, or equality if we can get it, but liberty in any case. They said we need both, but they thought of these things as two separate concepts, not wrapped together. Like Emma Goldman knew individualist anarchists, for example, Voltairine de Cleyre. She had critiques of her economic plans, but she didn't say she wasn't an anarchist. Murray Bookchin, an anarcho-communist, saw the Rothbardians in his day in the 80s and the 70s and 80s when he knew Murray Rothbard. He saw these guys as fellow travelers because they They stood against actual coercive government. Bookchin wanted a society where there was communal ownership of the means of production, but he thought that voluntarily this could be worked out, that there could be an anarcho-capitalist society next to an anarcho-communist society, and he believed that wage workers would just move to his society, and that would prove this experiment peacefully that communal means of production was superior and more humane way to live. But he was not willing to just say Rothbard's bad dude. He's really not an anarchist. He's just as coercive as a conservative. He wasn't saying that. He was saying, let's see what economic mode of production works.
Right. So the problem with this is that, he's tackling what economic form of production works best and not which one would be more anarchist. Uh, when you have a workplace hierarchy and you have two classes of people who own things and another class who works in said private property, then I wouldn't say it's anarchistic, not under Bakunin's definition, not under Proudhon's definition, because Proudhon, again, bringing this up, his definition was the absence of a master or sovereign. When you have a boss or whatever above you in your workplace, then that is a master or sovereign. And the same thing for Bakunin. He said the negation of authority. If you have authority in your workplace, then it's not anarchistic. Not all aspects of society are anarchistic in that case.
All right. Well, I just have to say, I mean, you said that we wouldn't open up the can of worms with Proudhon because it's problematic that, he believed things that anarcho-communists didn't believe. But it seems like you're sort of like, whenever you have to bring up someone other. Okay, well, you brought him up again.
I said, I haven't done my homework about Proudhon. And from what I understand when I'm talking to you, you see him as a respected figure, as a respected anarchist figure. So I'm bringing up his definition of anarchism to prove my point to you.
Okay, but when I broke down that he didn't believe in a classless society, now we can't talk about, now Proudhon isn't a good example of an anarchist. It just doesn't, I don't know if it really follows.
Can you make your point again?
So,
like what you just said.
So if you're talking about Proudhon's definition, which to be fair is kind of vague, like the absence of a master or sovereign, to me that reads straight up just anti-state. Doesn't have any necessary economic implications. But you're saying that it does have this implication of also being, it has to be economically egalitarian as well. But on the other hand, when we actually look at what mutualism is, it's not egalitarian in the same way as anarcho-communism. There is class distinction in that. So he's making a definition that excludes himself. That seems like self-detonating, right?
Could you define mutualism for me?
Sure. Mutualism is an anarchist ideology that's mostly concerned with what's called the what's it called? It's like occupancy and use norm for property ownership. So you cannot be an absentee landlord. You cannot be a capitalist owning a firm without actually operating it. It lowers the scale by which people can own property. You can be a shop owner, you can be a farmer, but you cannot basically, without using the Lockean homesteading principles, you can't actually own more than you can work, or own more than you can work or occupy, basically. So you can own a house because you're occupying the house. You cannot own an apartment complex because that would, and rent it out. I suppose you could just have a very large house, but you can't rent it out because then you are not using it. That would be undermining the occupancy and use norm. Proudhon very strongly believed that the only just I'm blanking on that word. It's like Locke uses it, but basically, like the only way you can acquire property for your use, including for for profit, could be from stuff using your own hands, occupying it rather than just collecting income from something.
So, from what I understood, in the case of that apartment complex, you can own it if you're putting it into use, and you can rent it out, or you can't rent it out.
Proudhon specifically does not seem like he thinks that large scale renting residential units, it would be acceptable under occupancy and use. Other mutualists seems like disagrees, but Proudhon specifically did not approve of that.
Yeah, so it seems like Proudhon isn't really that in support of private property. Then, if that's the case,
it's not.
Or
It's
am I
not
wrong?
it's not the same private property rights, but it is not communal property rights. You can be
so just
what was called like the petite bourgeoisie. You could be a shop owner and you could generate income and even have employees, but you could not be like a factory owner of like hundreds of people, because you wouldn't actually be like a worker there.
so under mutualism, it's okay to have workers under you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean Benjamin Tucker had actual wage workers. I don't know if it's documented if Proudhon did, but certainly under occupancy and use that would be acceptable.
Then yeah, I'm kind of beat here. I don't really got anything to say.
All right.
I would be interested in hearing from Adrian. I believe that like part of the thesis is that something that changed from Proudhon until the later anarchists, where we now get to anarcho-capitalism, is that marginalism started being introduced, and like Proudhon just didn't quite understand a lot of these things.
Well, yeah, and certainly he died before he could possibly have known about it. One of the old American mutualists, Stephen Pearl Andrews, who is a disciple of Jeffrey Tucker, Benjamin Tucker, not Jeffrey Tucker. Stephen Pearl Andrews wrote a book about called Science of Society, and he was introduced to marginalist theory by this time. This was like the late 1870s, maybe early 1880s. But he started actually fully advocating for like wage work. I don't think he went necessarily as far as accepting like absentee ownership. But yes, the rise of marginalism, it is funny. It does that does coincide with like the decline of what we could call individualist anarchism, which mostly includes mutualism, and then there's things like egoism or like anarcho-Georgism, like Spencer Heath was an advocate of. This all falls away when marginalism raises up, and then liberals now have a good case to make that like factory owners are not actually coercive and stealing surplus value, that there's something more complicated going on.
Yeah, so like, I bring that up because I think it helps to highlight how we're not some deviation from the anarchist line or the liberal line here. This is just the natural progression that happens when further developments were made elsewhere, namely in economics, which then eventually led to the development of praxeology. Then if you circle back around and apply the praxeologic methods to the anarchist thesis, well, then you get Murray Rothbard. So it's just a very clean progression of what was already going on there, which is why I don't buy that we are like some divergent factor, especially when the people who are claiming that are themselves latecomers to the anarchist movement.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, like, insofar as individualist anarchism survived in America and in the world, it was by people who were very adjacent to laissez-faire in general. For example, H.L. Mencken was a big fan of Tucker, and he talked a lot about his ideas. He was not a big fan of anarcho-communism. And Rothbard was certainly a big fan of Mencken, and so were a lot of the proto Ancaps and libertarians of like the 1940s and 50s. Albert J. Nock began as a Georgist and later became a philosophical anarchist during the 1930s and 40s. It's very like there's this space of even Tucker's calling himself a consistent Manchesterian, right? Manchester liberalism being laissez-faire liberalism, minarchism, proto-libertarianism, whatever you want to call it, but saying like, no, us anarchists, us mutualists, American mutualism, this is laissez-faire, rather than being like, oh, laissez-faire in private property is evil, full stop. It was like, no, Tucker at this time laboring before under the labor theory of value rather than marginalism, which came after his active years. He said like this is the real laissez-faire. But it's all we've always been in the same continuity. Laissez-faire and anarchism, they're very close cousins. They always have been.
Well, to be fair to Soren, he said that he's just about at the limits of what he has to say on this topic. Soren, I want to give you the opportunity before we do have other callers in the queue, and I don't want to turn this into just sort of tying you to a pole and making you listen to our afterthoughts. I'd like to know if you're still, if I could, I just want to ask this one question. This is what I'm most interested in. It seems to me that for you, the point is there's just, maybe we can call this even like a principle, but there's no negotiating on, in order for something to be properly anarchistic, there has to be absolutely no hierarchical features within it. Is that a fair assessment?
Within society, yeah, I was kind of convinced that was the case, but now I'm kind of half convinced, because if Proudhon really believed in private property, then I have to go and do my homework again and see what I got to say about that, and then come back.
Certainly. Well, if that's the case, I think that this has been a really interesting conversation. I enjoyed listening to it very much. Thanks so much for calling in. Otherwise, there would have been no conversation. If it's okay with everybody here, I mean, Zulu, Adrian, unless you guys want to jump in with any final comments or anything you guys want to say before he goes.
No, it's just nice having a conversation.
Yeah,
I just want to say friendship is the most important quality.
Good.
And stay
Okay.
in school.
Excellent, excellent final comment. So, Soren, in that case, we'll give you the final word. Please, if you want to just rehash your argument, or if you want to maybe share with us, you mentioned there's a little bit of reconsidering there. I might be interested to hear what, I think you did just say this, but just for a wrapped up final statement, what was most effective in changing your mind about that, or just adding that element of doubt? And also, what features are keeping you from going all the way? What's still in support of your position? And then hopefully we'll have another chat in a couple of weeks and pick it up from there.
Yeah. So to wrap it up real quick, my initial claim was that anarcho-capitalism cannot, or anarchism can't be capitalist, and anarcho-capitalism was a 20th century invention that kind of claimed the validity in history of anarchism, but proposed something new. And what I learned was that Proudhon himself was in favor of private property, and he was the first person to call himself an anarchist. And I think that kind of has something going for it. Then what's keeping me from going all the way, though, is I can't really say give my full opinion on it without doing my own research first. I think I gotta go see if there's any other refutes out there that say maybe Proudhon was in favor of private property, but he also had this belief that makes anarcho-capitalism inherently not anarchist, or claiming to be anarchist, or not a part of the tradition, or whatever. And yeah, I think after I've done that, I'm gonna come back either to continue this debate or to propose something new.
Excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to it. I just want to say thanks again so much for being here. We'll let you go, and I can't wait to hear from you. So, as you know, we're
Yep.
very easy to get a hold of. Just reach out anytime you'd like to,
Mhm.
and we'll make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row for you. So, everybody,
Yep.
that was Soren. Thanks so much. Have a good evening. We do have other callers in the queue who we're going to be bringing up shortly, but we're going to just take a very brief intermission here before we pull them up to answer a text question because I need a minute to get everything set up, or maybe not even a text question. I want to just say, Adrian, the property is liberty line coming from the same person who said property is theft. That I wasn't aware of that, and I thought that it was a really like perfect way of undermining the argument that him saying property is theft means something far reaching. I thought that was really interesting. I wasn't aware of that myself. So thank you for that.
I hope he gets something from Proton because it's kind of hard for me to get that much out of him. I would encourage him to read Tucker, much easier to read, and he translated Proton into English. So I think if you're still listening, Soren, that would be my recommendation.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got some other callers today, guys. Thanks everyone for being with us so far. That was a nice, long, and insightful call, as you can see there. I think I'll just move this over here. We've got some more callers in, and in fact, this next call has multiple people in it. This next call is going to be from some monarchists in the traditional sense, not in the Hoppian sense. Who'd like to talk to us about monarchy. So I'm going to bring them up now, and we'll get started. We'll try to keep it organized. We haven't had too many multiple caller situations up until now. So, monarchist and monarchist, you guys are both on the air. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, the way this normally works is, I think the best way to just jump right into this is if you guys either have a challenge, a specific challenge that you'd like to send towards us, Ancaps, or if you have a question. Either way.
Well, I am the main debater today, and I have some claims, and one of them is that you cannot prove that there was any invention which wasn't thanks to monarchistic elements. So I hope you understand what I mean.
I think so. We'll ask for some elaboration if we need to. It sounds like you've got multiple premises or multiple arguments. So let's get them all out here first, and then we can tackle them one at a time.
Yeah, and so I don't say my second claim.
You can do it now. That'd be fine.
Oh well, actually, never mind. I will say that later. Don't worry.
All right, we can start with this one. Well, that is an interesting place to start. I'll get the ball rolling, and then I'll try to take a step back and leave it to Adrian and Zulu to follow through this. So you cannot prove that there was an invention that wasn't the result of a monarchist influence. So my question would be, even if we had, if we agree, for example, that a monarchist, like the king himself, had personally invented every single thing that ever was invented, if we granted that, how would we, like, by what method would we discern that that is an indication that only a monarchy could have invented those inventions?
So what I mean, if I can just say that real quick, is what I mean is that I think there wouldn't be countries without monarchies, like because every country has begun with a monarchy or exists thanks to a monarchy. So because of this, and because these inventions were made in countries or made by people who came from a country, Because of this, and because the country exists thanks to monarchists, I think that there wouldn't have been any invention which wasn't thanks to like these. I said monarchistic elements because many tribes, have invented many stuff, but many tribes back in the day had many monarchistic elements. For example, like uh, hierarchy, or like a chief, or he just passed his powers, inherited his powers to his son, right? So these are like some little stuff elements I would consider as monarchistic elements. So
Well,
that's why I said that.
perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much. That seems like the ball is rolling and the stage is set. I guess I'm gonna hand it over to Adrian and Zulu. And Adrian and Zulu, maybe you guys can just get into a flow, and I won't have to coordinate. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah, I do have a very broad argument against this, but I want to start with something very, very specific. Namely, I personally invented a method of interpreting an Obsidian vault as an AstroJS content directory. Sorry. So in this invention, where did I rely on monarchism?
Well, your parents or your ancestors relied on monarchism because back in the day, many like monarchies gave protection and just made the human population stronger, I would say, and your ancestors relied on the monarchy back in the day, and because of that, and because of them, you exist. So
Okay, so really
it
what you're
goes
saying
back to the
is
monarchy.
every toenail clipped is because of the monarchy. The monarchy is responsible for every single time a person clips a toenail. Because, well, if you go back, I
well,
wouldn't have
not.
existed if there weren't
Well, I
monarchies. in the
won't
past. Okay, it's
say.
great.
I wouldn't say responsible, but I
But
would
they are
say
responsible
thanks
for the
to.
inventions.
I'm sorry.
Why are they responsible for the inventions, but not every time I clip a toenail?
Well, I said they are like thanks to these monarchistic elements, not really responsible, but without these monarchistic elements, there wouldn't have been inventions. And just my question is, if
Can
you can
I?
tell me any
Well, what about this?
invention? Yeah.
Well, that's this invention. I invented a method of interpreting an Obsidian vault as an AstroJS content directory. That's one
Yeah, but
particular concrete invention.
well,
Can
the
I
thing is, you wouldn't.
explain?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So I think what he's saying is that he's arguing that a lot of inventions are facilitated by the existence of a state,
Is this
and even if I mean, please tell me if I'm wrong, and then attributing the existence of a state to monarchy.
I didn't invent this because there was a state. It's like, oh, great, there's a state. Now I can invent this thing. The state didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, but you were born in the state, in the hospital, which the state has created
Right.
and
So every
built it.
toenail I clip is
And
thanks to monarchy.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So every
get
toenail I
the
clip
last-
is thanks to monarchy. Because if there wasn't monarchy in the past, I probably would not have
Well,
been born.
it's the same. Like you could say the same for like it's because of your mother, right? It's because your mother has given birth to you. It's the same. Like saying logic,
So are you claiming that monarchism, because there was monarchism,
Yeah.
every toenail I clipped happened, right? That it wouldn't have happened if there weren't was there monarchism? Because it seems like a very uninteresting thesis there. Because if you go back into ancient Rome and Caesar doesn't cross the fucking river, right? Then probably everything about history changes,
Yeah.
right? So,
So,
that's a very uninteresting thesis. Like, what about this is specific to monarchism?
Yeah, well, what I mean with that is just that without monarchy, we wouldn't even have, like, just to prove this point, without monarchy, we wouldn't even have these inventions, is what I'm trying to prove.
My invention
And
that wouldn't have existed without monarchy. Is that your claim?
if monarchy wouldn't have existed back in time, yes, you wouldn't
Well, yeah,
have
only because I
existed,
would have
and
been bored.
therefore,
Every nail that I
I'm
clip
so-
is also because of
What?
monarchy.
yeah, we could say that. It's like the same, like,
Not an interesting thesis.
yeah.
That's not monarchism getting credit for all of the nails that I clip, or because of monarchism getting credit for all these inventions. That's just
Well,
saying
yeah, but
the butterfly effect. That
I
if you
just
change
want
something
to,
major in history, then everything from that point on will be changed. Like this
yeah,
doesn't
true.
tell us that monarchism leads to more innovation.
Yeah, but I just want to prove this point because, I mean, not
You can't,
look,
unless
history
you
didn't
make a
just,
very uninteresting point, which I'm pointing out here.
when,
If it's a very
let me just say something.
uninteresting thesis that
You know,
if you changed it such that in Egypt, one of the pharaohs survived for 10 years fewer, yeah, that's probably going to have massive knock-on.
I think what is being argued, I might be wrong with this, is it's not necessarily like, I mean, obviously that first statement is true, but like uninteresting, as you said. But like that, as like things set up by a monarchy have been necessary in furthering inventions and development.
Namely, every invention was the claim.
If that makes sense.
well, I said not every invention. I just said,
Actually, you said you said your claim was that we cannot prove that there are any inventions not due to monarchy. That was your claim.
that is my claim, but I'm not saying. Look, I'm not saying every invention was made or was invented by a monarchy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that without monarchy, we wouldn't have had these inventions. And
which particular inventions? Like, what inventions did monarchism actually allow? If you're stepping away from the original thesis.
Oh well, like in the feudal, like in the medieval times, everything was what was invented in the medieval times, I would say, right? I mean, there wasn't
so everything that was invented in the Middle Ages was because of monarchy instead of in spite of monarchy.
Well, we could say that, I guess, because these people wouldn't have existed.
No. Let's go away from the uninteresting thesis of, well, they wouldn't have existed if there wasn't a monarchy. That's an uninteresting thesis, right? So I want the more interesting thesis that, like, structurally monarchism allows these things to be invented where they couldn't have been invented otherwise.
No, look, it's possible, but there is no like, there's just no other invention you could mention. I mean, before there were countries, there were some inventions, right? But these inventions were probably made in tribes who had these monarchistic elements. And after there were these countries, the population just rised higher, and there was protection, and people died less, and so on. And I just want to know if you agree on my statement.
So I agree with the uninteresting thesis. I agree with the uninteresting thesis that if you change a major part about history, like the Anglo-Saxons never go into the island of Britain, that many different things will change from that point on, right? And that's going to have huge knock-on effects. I agree with the uninteresting thesis. What I want to know is, what is the interesting thesis? Like, are you trying to make some sort of claim that monarchism allows for a greater level of innovation than otherwise?
We, like, because there was a centralized government, and because of this, I would say it just helped to invent more stuff, I would say. But besides that, not just because you changed something back in history, not just because of that, but because if you just let it out, like just totally not have any monarchy, the population would have stayed so low in that, like it was in that time, with just these tribes. And that's a very important point, I think. And like, I mean, I don't really know how much the population back then was, but it wasn't a billion, right? So
We
we would
have.
have.
It seems that we've got an interesting second topic here, which is whether or not a centralized society facilitates invention. And I think, Zulu, you've got a lot to say on that. Before we move over to that topic, we'll put a pin in that. We'll come right back to it because I think, like Zulu is correctly pointing out, that's the interesting thesis here. I want to see, because I think before we kind of didn't get an answer on this. I'm just really curious. Even if the monarch personally invented every invention himself, so that's like the maximum that I could grant you. Obviously, not what you're saying, but for the sake of argument, let's take it all the way. Even if that was the case, what reasoning are you using to conclude that therefore the monarch was necessary? Because from like the argument I want the audience to pick up here on is just because somebody does something does not establish that it was necessarily only them who could have done it. So I want to know what reasoning you're using to get from point A to point B.
So I think that shows that monarchy was just faster and better in that,
Compared to what?
compared to the other societies, I would say, right? I don't know if you agree that the world was anarchic before there were countries. Do you agree on that?
I think that the world was perhaps chaotic, we could say, and I certainly don't think that the world simply uniformly switched over from pre-states to post-states. I think it's complicated, but anarchy, as we mean it, has to do with people not doing aggression, and I don't think we've ever had a world that was absent aggression.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I want to say with that. Just that monarchy is better in, like, a centralized government is in that better. Maybe like back then, surely. I'm really not sure if it would be right now like that, because everybody knows just almost everything, right? Like, not everything, but many things. And so they could go on with this knowledge and invent stuff if they would be on their own. But what I'm just trying to prove is this my first claim, and if you agree on that.
Okay, well, I do want to say that I do not think that explains the reasoning that to the question that I'm posing. So instead of repeating ourselves here, we'll move on to the next claim. Zulu, you must have a lot to say on whether or not you think that centralizing society fosters more rather than less invention. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely false, and we can get there pretty easily. Like, I suppose, what is the root cause of invention? What causes invention in the first place? Well, the answer is quite clear. It's the mind. If you don't have a mind that can go out there and look at the world and devise new methods of interacting with the world and produce those methods in question, then you don't have invention. You don't have innovation. But we saw a few things in that little picture I was drawing there. You have to be free to be looking out at the world. You have to be free to apply those thoughts you have to the world and be productive. You have to be free to do all these things, because minds can't be inventive or productive if they're paralyzed. Like, it's actually not logically possible for a mind to be controlled by some other mind. So all you can really do is shut down that mind, right? As Ayn Rand says, I believe a bullet is not an argument, right? I can't convince you to believe that 2 + 2 = 6 by pointing a gun at your head and saying you better believe it. I can only shut down your processes of reasoning. I can't force you into thinking in the ways that I want you to think.
Um, well, if I can answer to that, so you said freedom is required, and I think that's a good point. But freedom of problems in your head, right? So if you do not think of your problems that you currently have, then you can think about other stuff, and this could be an invention. And because you don't think about other unnecessary things, for example, like surviving and all of that, you can invent because you have more time and are more chill and stuff. And a centralized government gave you protection, like the kings back then. They gave you protection, and they just even like they built roads and hospitals and schools, education. I think even like we wouldn't even have a universal what do you call it? Money, which is a currency, not a universal currency, which is accepted all around the world, right? So that's one important point too.
I'm going to
Yeah.
just jump in there to facilitate for Zulu just for a second there. So what's happening is you gave a couple of examples of problem solving that a mind can participate in. And one of those things you said was like building roads and hospitals. So if the king orders that hospitals and roads are built, then that's explicitly not an example of a free mind doing something. That's just a person being enslaved to do it. He's not applying his mind. You sort of put this idea, if you're free from the problems that are plaguing you, then that means that you're able to apply your mind to other things. So if the king comes to you and he says, you have to build this hospital, then you don't have to make any decisions about building a hospital. But then when the king walks away and you have to, now you're like, well, okay, but I can try to figure out like what's the most efficient way of bringing the logs and the stone over here. Suddenly, that's exactly where it's coherent to think of this activity as problem solving. But what is the difference between the problem solving where the person's actually using their mind and when they're not? It seems to be the presence of this coercive element, which is a perfect way of illustrating that the influence of coercion is suppressing or outright preventing someone to apply their mind to problem solving. Zulu, am I faithful to your position in that explanation?
Yeah, and also moreover, I think it is misunderstanding the history in question. Like, people like to, project back and think that the states back then were very similar to the states now. Not really, not really at all. They were just kind of, there'd be a local lord perhaps, and he'd get mad at you if you tried, poaching on his lands. And the king might get mad at you if you tried, quote unquote, stealing his, gold and silver and stuff by mining it out of the ground. But they really weren't investing a whole lot in infrastructure, for instance. Like pretty much all the roads, they're just built out by the people who use those roads, privately built out. It was not some directive by the king going, I want a road going here. Right now, the Romans, they built a lot of roads, certainly. But if we're talking about the Middle Ages, the vast majority of the roads were not being constructed by some centrally planned effort. And moreover, there's still the question of, well, sure, the state might have provided some amount of security, but providing security, that is a problem to be solved, right? Finding out how to get food over the winter, that's a problem to be solved. And these are problems you absolutely can be inventive around, and humans must have been inventive around at some point. It's absolutely not the case that you require a monarchy to have safety. That's absolutely not the case. So I'm really not seeing how the monarchy is causing there to be this innovation. Surely to the extent that there is a monarch who is ordering people about and controlling their minds, then they're not being innovative because they're enslaved. Slaves are not innovative. They're not productive.
Well, firstly, we were talking about a central government and not necessarily a monarchy. And I would like to answer first what Galazar said, and you said that the people must build a hospital or a school when the king tells them to. That's more or less true, but they get money for it. They they are paid, right, by the king, and plus they aren't building a hospital every day. They aren't building every day, right? And there are builders and non-builders. There, I mean, there isn't just builders who build the whole day. And actually, back then, in the medieval times, I think most like humans who were farmers had over 160 or 200, over 200 days like free or something. And I mean, this is like a very important point to make. So you don't build a hospital every day, just uh, once, and it stays there for 200 years, something like that, and you don't have to
Uh,
worry about that again.
I want to just repeat this back to you. I don't think we need to go down this rabbit hole, but I think it's good for posterity that we get this crystal clear. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that it is okay to enslave somebody as long as you compensate them.
Uh, well, no, I wouldn't call it enslave because I mean, slaves must work for free, right? And I mean, what slaves are like what the colonialists did to the Africans, but a king
Hold
didn't
on. Let's
do
just
that.
put a pin in there because that's a whole thought. So if we went back in time to the antebellum South, let's say, and we went on to a cotton plantation, and we
Mhm.
found that the slaves that were there, he gave each one of them a penny. So now
Yeah.
it's objectively the case that they are compensated. It's no longer true that they have to work for free. So are they not slaves?
Uh, well, they um let me just think about it a second because I
Sure.
mean they don't get the money they actually worked for, right? They get paid drastically less, and if we are
But they do
uh
get paid.
yeah, but I mean who does that, right? I mean in real life that's not the case. That's not what happened. But I
Well, no,
would
but so
say
let's just for the sake of understanding each other here, right? Like I don't
yeah,
want anyone to think that I'm suggesting that. I'm not
no,
saying that
yeah,
slaves were or weren't paid. That's not the point of the question. The point is you're saying, and I've got you to repeat this so that I made sure I was understanding you clearly.
yeah.
You're saying somebody is not a slave if they're compensated for their work. All
Well,
right.
if they
So
get yeah, if they get something for their work and they, I think, agree on it on that payment, I think that would make them for sure not a slave. There
well,
are of course other.
you've just
Uh,
done
yeah.
such an excellent job of you've just taken a leap towards being an ANCAP. I think everybody in the audience is probably rejoicing right now. It's absolutely true. If you agree to do something and not under duress, not at the point of a gun, if you agree to work for a certain amount, then that's a voluntary transaction that I think we're all very supportive of. Now, what's curious to me is you're suggesting, therefore, that everything that monarchs had made people do was a voluntary transaction.
No, I don't say that it was all voluntary, but I think uh, when but I think even though these sometimes humans were forced, which is I think sometimes important because humans are very subjective. So you need them to do some stuff they wouldn't like to do, and still they got what they deserved. And even if I'm a religious person, I'm not. I don't know about you, but uh, even if they wouldn't have got it in their life, they would get it in the afterlife. So it just they will get uh, sooner or later what they deserve. So I wouldn't worry on that. And
Okay,
by the
so
way,
but let's just take
wait,
a step back here
just
because
a second, just a second. My friend, I think, can't speak. His microphone is maybe I think off or something. He has some problems with that. But maybe he can rejoin, right?
absolutely, if he rejoins, I'll pull him right back up. I'll keep an eye
Okay,
out for that.
I talk with him. Yeah, yeah. You can go
So
on.
we did some talking there back and forth about, well, people aren't really slaves because they get compensated, and then we went down, okay, so but all that was unnecessary, it turns out, because you've turned around and you said to us, well, actually, we do. The monarch does force people to do work.
Well,
So
I
that was
said
all unnecessary. We
no.
are
Well, I said that is. I said the first one was. I said that would be 100% clear that this person wouldn't be a slave. That would be clear. I said. I didn't say. Yeah, it was a bit unnecessary, but just to make that my point of view, to make that clear for you, I said that it would be for sure that this person who agrees on to that and gets what he gets, then of course this person isn't a slave. Just so you know my point of view.
okay, but the monarch does enslave other people.
No, he forces sometimes, not always, because there are, I mean, people
So
who
if you're forced to do something, you're not being enslaved.
no. I mean, you are forced to go to the school, right? Are you enslaved?
Yes.
Okay, well then you're wrong. I would say. I mean,
On what
then you have
basis, though?
to
How do you justify
you
that
have
claim?
you have to rethink of what you call enslaving. Like, what
What
do
do you
you
think slavery means?
like? I look. My personal view is that you take somebody unwillingly from his home, family, his land, and take him with you, and you make him do stuff, make him work for free. And
Why does it have to be for free?
I'm sorry.
What would you call the concept of just forcing somebody to do something? Like, I come over, I don't take you from your family or anything,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I just start working you. I bring your family along. I'm like, okay, you're gonna work this plantation for me, and if you don't, I'll whip you. If you try to escape, I'm gonna shoot you with a gun. So don't try anything on. What would you describe that broader context? Well, I might
Well,
still compensate you.
if look, if I get what I deserve for my work, I am not a slave, I would
Who
say.
determines what is deserved? What if
I'm
I just
sorry?
determine what's deserved? Right? I just decide you're going to work for me. You're not allowed to leave. You're going to do whatever the hell I say. You're still going to get compensated. But you're going to do whatever the hell I say. What would you describe that by, if not slavery?
Well, I would describe that as a lower level of slavery, maybe. But
It's
I wouldn't
slavery.
really. Well, I wouldn't really call it slavery, but a lower level
What is it?
of. I don't know. I'm not a native speaker, but
Well, we both are. We would say that that's called slavery.
You do have a translator you brought with you, so let's get it from him then.
well, yeah. Well, he is currently not in here, right? So he just quit, I think, and will rejoin, my friend. But
He
I
did
don't know when.
rejoin. He should be
Oh.
here.
Hi, does my
Okay.
mic work?
Yeah, well, then I would take some help with this
Hello.
translation. Yeah. Hello.
Oh, is that working now?
No, it's working.
You're
It's working.
you're working. You're on. You're on the
Oh,
air.
okay, great. Sorry, what am I being asked? Forgive me.
Oh, so do you have a word which would describe a lower level of slavery?
No,
like-
you're starting with your term, not the definition. So we're looking for a word that
Yeah.
matches the definition of somebody being forced to do something against their will. What do you call that?
I would.
Yeah,
No,
I would.
your translator.
Sorry. I would refer to that as slavery, yes, but I think there's different kinds of slavery. But yeah,
Yeah, well,
Can-
there are
can-
different kinds of slavery. Some who are less bad, I would say. Some who are better, right? I
So-
mean, my religion allows slavery, so in terms,
well,
some
there we
kind.
go.
So
Zulu, take it from me after this, but I can't. I gotta help this. There's a couple of questions our audience is asking. I promise you guys, I'm gonna get to that question, the one you're thinking of, but first I gotta do this one. And the translator, please. You guys are both called monarchists in here, so I'm just calling you that because I don't have anything
yeah,
else to call you.
yeah.
But translator, you said it's slavery. We appreciate your candidness about that. I'd like to know.
Yeah.
You said there's different types of slavery. Can you just give us a couple right quick so I can write them down? What are the flavors of slavery?
Yeah. So all I'm saying is, I mean, you could identify a difference between indentured servitude, where someone offers themselves to be like an indentured servant to pay off their debts, which is very different to. I'm not supporting that, but for example, that's allowed in the Torah. So like different cultures did consider it differently. That's different to like, for example, the kind of slavery that happened in the transatlantic slave trade.
Okay, so we've got indentured servitude and chattel slavery. And
Well,
before
I don't
before
know
I
what
hand it
that
back
is.
to Zulu, just want to make sure you get like I just want to give you more opportunity. If there's any other flavors you're thinking of, we want to get them while the
Well,
issue's
I
hot.
don't know what these two are, but well, there is slavery where you don't get anything for your work, right? There is slavery where you get something which isn't worth of what you have accomplished, and well, but these are like, just to make the difference, like some of them aren't as bad as the other, as you can maybe see, but yeah, that's basically the kinds of slaveries I can think of right now. Maybe later on some others, but
That's okay. That's okay. We don't need to pull all the napkins out of the hat there. Zulu, please.
Sure. So I think the fundamental question is, can somebody be productive to the extent that they're enslaved? My answer would be absolutely not. So therefore, to the extent that the monarchy is enslaving people, those people are no longer productive to that extent.
well, they are productive in producing like buildings, right? I mean, they are productive in a sense, and I mean, there isn't just building structures. There is being a teacher, right? You can be forced to get educated, or you can be forced to learn, and you can be forced to invent, even though like,
How
right?
can
me
you
ask
be
you a question.
forced to learn?
But that's
If
a bit
you
off topic, but yeah.
if you have an EpiPen, right? You know,
A what?
EpiPens and
I-
they're epinephrine pens. They're used. They're like when somebody's having an allergic reaction. They
Oh
stab
yeah,
them,
yeah,
you
I
Okay.
know, yeah.
So those are expensive, right? So if
I
I
guess.
have an EpiPen, right,
Mhm.
and I go around and I take all the EpiPens in my community and I buy them all up. Everyone sells them to me and I buy them all up. And then I go and what I use them for is I burn them in a fire because I'm super into watching EpiPens melt. I just think it's hilarious. Would you say that that was a waste?
Well, I would say you didn't use it for the purpose it was think of, right?
Right. But would you say
Uh,
it's a waste?
Well, what do you call a waste? I mean,
Do you want to help him out, translator?
well, I
Uh,
know what wasting is, but I mean, what would you personally call as wasting? I mean, you bought it, right? You used it for something, but I think wasting is very subjective.
Okay. So would you personally consider it a waste?
I'm sorry?
Would you personally consider it a waste?
Well, not really. You use it for something, right? It's not a total waste, so no.
Okay, that's really interesting. Let me try a different example. What do you think? What are some of the things that monarchs do that you like the most?
What a monarch do? Well, ruling, just having power alone is enough for me.
Cool. Do you
Like
like when they
him.
build big castles?
Uh, well, with their own money, of course.
Cool. So there's all these rocks in a quarry, and
Yeah.
I'm a big rock breaker. I love breaking rocks. So
Mm.
the king, he would like to buy those rocks to build a castle, and I
These
go in.
broken rocks or these?
They're rocks, dude. They're rocks. All right.
Yeah, I
They're
mean,
rocks.
you said you like breaking rocks, but
They're not
are
broken
these-
yet.
Okay, okay.
The king is going to go buy these rocks, but I get there first. I buy them first, and I break them all. Now it's not a waste because I bought them, but now because I did that, the king cannot build his castle. There's no more stone anywhere nearby. Now, I'm not going to ask you another follow-up question because apparently this is like pulling teeth. From the Austrian point of view, from the economist point of view, we think that some things can be put to better uses than other things. And there's a
Yeah,
really
true.
important question. The question is, how do you determine what is the optimum thing, the optimum way that something can be used? Now, this is something that probably most of our audience is really familiar with. I'm talking about the Austrian economic tradition. The Austrians are going to put forward that the way that we do this is through the free market. Okay, we need to have access to something called factor prices so that we can determine what the best way of allocating a resource is. This is called the
Can
economic calculation problem. So
yeah, I heard of that. Can I just say something to that?
you want to make a comment on the economic calculation problem?
Yes.
Please do.
Well, I
Please do.
think this economic calculation problem isn't really the biggest problem because I mean we had monarchies lasting for thousands. Like we have the Holy Roman Empire, right, which lasted 1,000 years, and they didn't really had a problem, right? Because like if you're gonna build a bridge or something, everybody knows, the builders know how to build this bridge out of what, right? They
Right.
know
So how
what
do you
the
decide? How do you decide which? So first of all, if you're going to build a bridge, you have to decide whether or not a bridge should be built at all. Because you're saying,
Well, let's
well,
say there
everybody just
is a
knows.
need.
What we're telling you, what we're contesting is how do they know? Okay. So for example, if
So
we have to connect. Hold on. There's two towns we
okay,
have to connect.
yeah.
Now we've decided to connect these two towns, but one path goes through a mountain, and it's going to need a lot of engineers in order to tunnel out the tunnel that's needed to get to the other town. The other
Mhm.
one goes over a ravine. We need a lot less engineers for that one, but we need a lot more metal. Okay, so we've already granted you that we need to get to this town, which we normally wouldn't grant, but let's say that we do.
Mhm.
Now
Yeah.
we have to choose. We have to choose: do we go through the mountain or do we go over the ravine? What process are you proposing to make that decision, and why is it justified?
Okay, so you said how do these people know how to build, like how to, with which elements and which resources to build this
They have to
structure?
choose. They have to
Yeah, they
choose
have.
either they have to either build the road through the mountain or they have
Oh,
to build the road over the ravine. How do they
well,
decide which?
they decide that because they learned it from elderly people or at school or just from their parents who have hundreds of years of experience in this and just gave on these informations about how to react or how to or what to do in such a situation. They knew and learned it from their parents, ancestors, whatever, and or in school.
Okay, so
So
let me just stop you there. You're
yeah,
saying they're going to be told by their ancestors. Their ancestors learned the information.
well,
That's my
they
question.
tried
What
it
is the
out.
information?
Well,
What is the information?
the information is his ancestors had the same problem few times, right? Not
Right.
just once.
So they have a
And
process.
wait, let me just
The
let me
answers
can I
have a
just
process. So I'm asking you, what is the process? What's being transmitted? Because if I
yeah,
ask you, how do you
mm,
solve this problem? And your answer is, well, someone's going to tell me the answer. That's not an answer.
yeah, but can I just finish that what I was saying? So What I'm saying is his ancestors had this same problem, like his descendants, and they tried different ways. And one way maybe worked better than the other way. And
How do
when
they
it
know?
was, well, I don't know. I'm not a builder, but
That's the question.
well, the
That's the
question, yeah,
question.
okay, well, maybe it was harder to build the tunnel from the mountain than the other way, you know. So because they figured that out, that it would be harder to do that through the mountain, they will give this information to their children when it's time for their bro when it's time for their children to know how to build, right? So when it's time
So
for the children to be builders.
your answer to the economic calculation problem is that your ancestors will tell you what is the easiest.
Yeah, what's the easiest, what's the best, and even if that would be case, it's not really the biggest problem, I think. I mean, it's not that deep if you just use aluminum instead of metal, right? As long as it
Aluminum is a metal,
stays, yeah, I mean, like iron or something, right? So
also a metal.
yeah, what I'm saying is it doesn't really matter if you, like, it's not that important, it's not that deep if you use aluminum or copper or iron, right? So it's not that important. It's not that
So, what
crazy.
economics does a really good job of is helping us understand these sorts of assertions. So there's this statement being made, it's not that deep. How do you know what the ramifications are without an understanding of economics? What the difference is between going through the mountain or over the ravine or choosing iron or aluminum? Like, what process are you using to determine how deep it is? That's what we're asking.
Oh, so
So
how
to
do
to
I
to
know how
assert that it's
important
not
that
deep,
is? How
right?
important that is?
Exactly.
Okay. Um. Well, I think it's not that important because I don't really remember or see any problem we would have with that in the the feudal system or in the medieval times. Like I don't
So,
think that
so
you would
you
have.
can't think of any times that something was done inefficiently, and for
Well,
that
yeah,
reason, you don't
of
think the
course
economic calculation problem
it
is a big
was,
deal.
of course, maybe it is was made inefficiently, yes, but it's not really doesn't harm you that much, right? Maybe
How do you
you just,
know?
yeah, I know that because for example, a bridge uses, like, normally a bridge needs, let's say, copper to get built, and copper is like $10 per kilo. Okay, just an example. And but you just buy iron, which is $11 for the kilo. So even though it would have it should have been copper, you use iron, and the deepness of it is that you just gave $1 more for the kilo than you normally would have given. But for
Amazing. So I agree
in
with you. Hold on, let's stop there because we've reached apotheosis. We're on a higher plane of existence now. We agree with you
Mhm.
completely. The way that you can determine what the better way is through the profitability that is revealed in the price mechanism. You
No,
told us we got to look at the price of these materials. We got to look at, well, not only the cost of producing the bridge or the tunnel, but we got to try to understand how much money we're going to make relative to these each, relative to their cost of production, their cost of maintenance, over the time that it takes to capitalize on these developments. That's a great insight, and that's exactly what we would have said. We need prices. So where do prices come from?
well, before that, not just prices, but it must be, of course, strong, right? So it doesn't break. Yeah, but so to your question, where do these prices come from, right?
Yes,
Well,
sir.
the market, the markets, whoever sells it makes the price, right? I mean, I'm I'm a feudalist, so I'm very capitalistic, but not Oh my god, he's not. I mean, it's not the the way of capitalism itself, right? The capitalism we have right now, it's
Okay.
differently.
Well, let me help you out there a little bit. So the emergence of prices, an asking price is not the price we're talking about here. In economics, we're interested in actualized prices. So that's the price that actually takes place when a real exchange happens. Now, we can always think of a price as a ratio between the exchanged goods. So with us living in a money economy, you can expect that one of those two ratios is going to be dollars or ounces of gold or what have you. So for example, one coin is one apple, or it could be one half of a coin is 8 apples, or one apple is 8 coins. You can imagine that these ratios can go in all kinds of different shapes. The point is, that's what we're interested in economics, not just the asking price. If you go to the supermarket, they have a price on the thing. You might buy it, you might not. That is what we call a price, but it's not it's not the scientific price. We're interested in actualized prices. So, in order to get a price on a material
Yeah.
that you're going to use to build something and that you're going to use to make decisions about, is it cheaper, is it more profitable to build the tunnel, is it more profitable to build the ravine? We need prices, and prices come from individuals exchanging.
Well,
And the
I don't
reason
agree
that's
on.
important. Oh, you
I
don't
don't
agree with
agree
that?
on no the your sentence before that, that the person needs to choose what's the most what's the most cheap one. So
No, I corrected that. Profitable, the most profitable.
profitable. So in terms of money or in what?
We're making yes, we're talking about an economic decision here. We're
Okay,
talking
so
about
in terms of
money
money,
profit.
but well, you see, sometimes it's cheaper to do something with a cheaper element, but if you use the other element, it has more durability.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's
you
taken into consideration when we're
so
talking
it's
about profits.
oh, so you mean not just money?
No, we mean durability as well. Durability is part of a money profit. So if I
Okay,
say
so
Zulu, I'm going to buy a lawnmower. I can save $1 on this lawnmower, but it's going to break after the first time I use it. That's obviously related to the profitability. I'm going to have to go back and buy another lawnmower immediately. So all of these concerns you have are encapsulated in money profitability.
okay, so wait, your question for me was, can I hear it again, please?
I don't think
I'm
I was at a
a bit,
question yet. I think it was explaining something. So,
yeah.
in order to have prices, we have to have people exchanging things. It's the exchange that takes place that reveals, what's the word I'm looking for here, guys? Help me out here. It reveals, um,
The
gosh darn.
worth of that, or
What's essentially happening is the exchange ratio. So if Zulu's going to buy an apple for $1, that's showing us something really important. We know for certain, because of his purchase of the apple, that he values the apple higher than the dollar, and vice versa. The seller values the dollar higher than the apple. Because this exchange takes place voluntarily,
okay, so
the
free
price that's
markets.
forming,
The point is free markets.
the price that forms, we know economically, represents an improvement in the situation of both of these people. Now, if Zulu only buys the apple because somebody else puts a gun to his head and says, Zulu, if you don't buy this apple, I'm going to kill you, then Zulu's going to buy that apple because he prefers having the apple purchased and not being shot in the head over not buying the apple but being shot in the head. That's his preference. However, that price information, because it came about as the result of a coerced situation, it doesn't actually give us any information any longer about how we can allocate our resources. All right. So, what we're trying to help you to see here, to understand, is that when you have a system that's centrally planned, all of the decisions that are being made economically are happening under coercive element. The prices are either distorted or they're not being taken into consideration at all. So when we ask you a question such as, the king is going to decide to build a road either through a mountain or over a ravine, the question, he can say, well, I can see that the ravine is more profitable, but he's spending other people's money that's been coercively taken from them, and he's deciding to build that road in the first place. So no matter how you look at it, he's not going to be able to take advantage of the information that we gain from prices. He's going to necessarily be acting inefficiently. Now, I've been sort of monopolizing it here. Not only do we have Zulu, but we've got Floppa back. So, Zulu, I'm going to hand it to you, and then, if you don't mind, hand it over to Floppa whenever you get to the point that you'd like to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the economic calculation point has been made very clearly. I want to take a step back from the economics for a second and ground ourselves back in the actual historical analysis being done here.
Before that, just something. Could you guys just give me like a example of what the extent of this problem, what it could cause, be in a feudal medieval time, right? I mean, what could happen?
As you saw in the Soviet Union, that needs going, people starve to death.
I said
you
medieval,
have total poverty. Yeah, I'm saying the extent could be the same if they had the same level of central planning.
So you say because of this calculation problem, because of these few dollars and few
because it's impossible to know if means are being allocated correctly.
Okay,
you cannot find
just
the
because
most
of these
productive arrangement of the factors.
Yeah, so just because of these little like, what do you call it? Translator.
Yes, because of all of those little prices, you can't know the most value productive arrangement of the factors.
Yeah, so but because of that, people didn't die in the monarchy. I mean,
right, because it was limited. And that's the point I'm going to get into here.
The biggest point.
So let me get into that point.
Okay.
So I think you're overstating the involvement of the state within medieval society. Sure, there was plenty of state actions going on, but where you're seeing any sort of innovation and stuff like that, like for instance, there was not a central bank, right? It was mostly just, precious metals in currency. It would be debased over time, of course, but nothing like you see today. The state really didn't control money, and also any sorts of innovations you see within the Middle Ages, they're not being done by the slaves. They're not being done by state directive. So like all the innovations you see in architecture to make complex stone structures for cathedrals or for castles, that wasn't directed by the state. It was directed by private contractors. The engineers who would build mills or trebuchets, it wasn't the state saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. It was, somebody would pay a guy to do it. If I'm a lord, and I want to besiege a castle. Hold on. If I'm a lord and I want to besiege a castle, I'm not micromanaging everything there and centrally planning a trebuchet. I hire an engineer and say, engineer, I want you to design me a trebuchet, and I'll pay some carpenters to build the thing under your direction. Blah blah blah. This is not being done by slaves. It's being done by contracted workers. Sure, the money they got is in large part stolen on our terms, but it's not centrally planned.
Yeah,
so that seems to undercut your entire point, that the innovations are being done by the state.
Well, I think that wasn't the point of we weren't about talking about innovation, right?
That absolutely was your point. Your point was that because there was a central government, it allowed them to invent these things. But I'm saying that the innovations being done are not in fact because of the central government. They are being done by free people who have been contracted to do things.
Yeah, but like I said, you have less problems with a centralized state solving your problems.
No. The state is not solving problems. The state is only creating new problems.
But I mean, did it solve that chaos Galazar was talking about? Yes or no?
Not really, no.
Oh, so we still have the chaos like before there were countries on Earth, yes or no?
And chaos after, yes.
So we have still the same chaos, like
we have the same chaos. We didn't solve anything clearly.
Okay, so like we have still the same chaos like 30,000 years ago. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it was still pretty chaotic. In fact, chaos was in a much larger scale.
Okay, so right now it's the scale. Right now is the scale higher or lower?
It depends on where you are.
But everywhere are countries. I thought countries make just more problems.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, but everywhere are countries, so everywhere should be more problems and it should be more chaotic, right?
Well, the bigger
Then
the bigger the state. So problems aren't just referring to chaos. I want to get
yeah,
that.
but still,
Problems are problems, right? It's things that are hindering your attainment of ends. That's what I'm calling a problem. And whenever a state comes in and tries to quote unquote solve some problem, it in fact creates a whole litany of new problems. This is just the nature of how states are.
Okay, so but I mean, what problem? Just give me one so I can just answer that quickly. What?
Sure. So the United States government, they wanted to come in and solve the problem that, for instance, doctors were being underpaid. Okay, so they came in and
Yeah,
solved the
okay.
problems of doctors being underpaid, and now suddenly it costs people a whole bunch of goddamn money to go to the doctor. So they wanted to fix this problem. They told insurance agencies they had to accept everybody, no matter what. They couldn't discriminate. They had to cover pre-existing conditions. Okay, they solved that problem. That created a whole bunch of new problems to the point where it costs, potentially millions of dollars in the US to get a single medical intervention for you. That's
But I
one
mean,
little
wouldn't
set of problems that they tried to
yeah.
solve, was created new
So
problems out of.
wouldn't this be like a chain reaction which wouldn't end?
It could end if they just stopped trying to solve problems.
Yeah, but like you just put it in your words, it just goes on like that, right?
It doesn't necessarily keep going on. It's like Mises is saying.
Yeah. So how?
Hold on.
So
It's
after
like
some time,
hold on.
it ends, right?
Hold on. It's like Mises talks about how people see problems caused by a previous intervention and want more interventions to solve that problem. This is the wrong way of thinking about the economy. The way you solve these problems is by having the state retract its control, not by increasing its control. To the extent that there is no state, you don't have these state-caused problems.
So you're saying basically that we had less problems before there were countries on Earth?
Not necessarily. There were still definitely a lot of problems. But my point is that the state isn't solving those problems.
You said
I would rather live in the Middle Ages in like England than be a hunter-gatherer. That is correct.
But I mean, no, you said
because I think I would have more problems as a hunter-gatherer.
Yeah, okay.
But that doesn't mean.
I mean,
that the state
wait. Let me just finish.
Look,
you said
state of the state,
my friend. You said people in the like ancient times when they were in countries, they had less problems.
No, I didn't say that. I said the opposite of that.
Yes, you did. No, you said.
No, I did not.
My friend, you said countries create more problems. That means that when there weren't countries.
Nope, it doesn't mean that. I know where you're going with this. It does not mean that.
Yes, it does.
It's possible for
when you say that, that means that after. Let me just finish.
Hold on. It is possible for the problems that you face to be going down very steeply because of innovation, because of capitalism, whilst the state is adding more problems on. So it's a slightly less steep slope of your problems being solved, but they are still being solved. That doesn't mean that the state is aiding in solving those problems. It's in fact hindering the solving of those problems.
Just like a tiny note here. It's like the concept of ceteris paribus is it's just screaming to be pointed out here. Monarchist, do you understand the expression that there is like then otherwise? So when we're talking about like what Zulu's talking about now here with how many problems there are, you got to take into consideration that technology is changing over time. And we have to ask ourselves, if we're looking at a specific time, there's more problems than there would otherwise have been at that time. So we're not saying that because there's a state, necessarily things were better prior, because that doesn't take into consideration the passage, the inventions, the increasing level of technological advancement. The question is that we're putting forward is, like, whatever amount of scarcity there is in a given moment, the presence of the state guarantees that scarcity is greater than it would otherwise have been at that moment. Sorry for jumping in, Zulu. I'm going crazy over here.
So I just want to, like, again come to this back, because I think I can just debunk that very quickly, because his words were literally before he literally said countries make more problems than they previously were. So can I just finish, please? You
may not finish. You may not finish, because Zulu and me are both telling you, we're saying, no, you are misunderstanding us, and we're helping you understand what we're saying. And instead of saying, oh, this is what these two individuals are telling me that, like, they're saying, you're just saying, no, I'm going to pretend you said something else. If you're going to pretend that we're saying things that we didn't say, there's no point to continuing. So please understand, Zulu and I are both telling you.
Maybe you can restate the argument, our argument, or Zulu's argument, rather.
So, okay, I'm going to ask
and we can correct
Zulu.
you.
Okay, can I just ask Zulu this again? Do countries make more problems than they were previously were?
They make more problems than there would be otherwise.
What does that mean? I mean, my translator just went, so unfortunately I'm alone.
If you look at, like, two counterfactual paths of history, one where there is a state, one where there isn't a state, after some point in time. The one with the state, the state will cause more problems than in this counterfactual without the state.
Okay, I will just, for the sake of we can go on, I will just let go of this argument. Yeah. Okay, so we could go on where we state, right? I don't know where we stopped, but
so, I mean, this was, I believe, spun off from my point that the innovations you see in the medieval period, you know, innovations in architecture, blacksmithing, so on and so forth, they are not being directed by some centrally planned efforts, and they can't be. They're being directed by private individuals working these things out with their free minds. So to the extent that you have a state hindering that, you're not having innovation. So I'm not seeing how monarchism is causing innovation.
So monarchism is causing innovation by causing companies to exist. Because did you add companies before they were countries? I don't think so. And if yes, then I would like to hear a company before they were countries.
Did you have war before there were countries?
Yes, but
no, I don't mean violence. I mean war.
Well, I don't know what you.
War is, we're talking. People don't. When you see a fight in the street, you don't say, "Oh, that's a war." War is something that large groups do in an organized fashion. So this seems to be something that you require the centralized. This is something that requires.
Yeah, they were wars. Yeah.
Okay, so the state causes the existence of wars. Can we agree to that?
No, because before they were states, they were wars, right?
Give me an example of a stateless war.
Well, there were wars between tribes, right? Warlords who didn't have a state. So this is a war, and it isn't made by two states. This easy, my friends.
Let's say if there's a drive-by shooting, the Crips are shooting up some Bloods on the side of a road. Would you say that a war has just transpired there?
Well, no, but like you said,
okay.
If
I'm not saying no, it's much different in the tribal case.
No, but if they are, no, there is a difference. I mean, they were warlords and larger like tribes who
Warlords are states.
no, not necessarily.
Why not?
They do not necessarily need to
What's
be
the
the leader
distinction
of a
between a king and a warlord?
well, a king is the owner and the ruler of a country, and a warlord is just somebody who
He's the leader
goes
of.
no, he's the leader of some people, some soldiers.
Do they have
Mostly,
a defined territory?
he, well, you could say property maybe, but not a country.
So, what
Yeah.
is the distinction?
So you're asking me what
When
the
how many
distinction
people until
between a
it's a
country?
How many people would you necessarily need
Well,
until we can define it as a country?
That's not really important for the topic, is it? I mean,
Well, we're trying to draw.
wait, the question was,
I'm
were they
asking you the
wars
distinction
before?
between a king and a warlord. Like at what point, like a king has sovereign territory over, I'm guessing, whatever set of land. Now
Yeah.
we can say that the warlord also has said sovereign territory over his people, as you know, he is a warlord. So why would it be inaccurate to say that the warlord's territory would not be necessarily his country in a sense, right? Like,
I mean, it's overall agreed on it that warlords, before they were states, were necessarily owners of states. I mean, that's very
Let me
known.
jump
and-
in here right quick
But
so that we
can
can
I
get to the
just
bottom of this. No, you cannot. So we got a really interesting question here that I think we deserve to give this some attention. So the question is, define a state. Are tribe states? Are gang states? We do say gang wars after all, pointing out that we were using gangs as an example of a conflict that isn't a war. So I think it's a fair question. So what we're talking about here when we're talking about states is we're talking about and I'm thinking that Zulu and Flappa both have definitions that are going to be like semantically different here. But what we're talking about is an organization that's based on coercion. So as ANCAPs, we're rejecting aggression specifically. And so what's really the core of this disagreement here is we're trying to make the observation that warlords have a coercive relationship with the people under them in the same way that a king does. But instead of hearing an argument back that says no, the only possible defense that could be mounted then is that a warlord, everybody who's involved with the warlord's activities is doing so voluntarily. There's no threats there. There's no coercion there. Actually, warlords, that would be a distinction between a warlord and a king that would be pertinent to the discussion we're having because that's what we're rejecting here. All of this is about the rejection of aggression. Instead, what we're hearing is, well, the difference between a warlord and a king is that warlords wear pink shorts and kings actually wear blue shorts. These differences are not relevant, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to tiptoe around the fact that warlords have coercive relationships with their subjects in the same way that kings do. That's what we're trying to say, and we're having a little bit of difficulty here because the counter argument is essentially, well, I can show that they're not exactly the same thing by playing with words a little bit. That's not going to do any work when it comes to the principal question, which is showing that these are relationships that are based on coercion. I'm sorry for interjecting there, Flappa and Zulu, but I think that's the crux of where we're at here.
First of all, I'm sorry to get muted for the third time. That I think very disrespectful for your guest. But yeah, I will forgive you. So the question you guys asked me was different than, like, I mean, you asked me something and want me to think of what you mean, but I mean, I just answer what you asked me, right? And you guys asked me if there were wars before they were states, and I said yes, and you disagree on that, and it is clearly that there were wars. They were.
may I
think,
ask how you define a state, real quick?
Well, I don't really thought about that, so you could define it, and I could maybe agree on it. I don't know, because I would say, like, I know it's not really a definition, but I would say if a piece of land has like a ruler and its own like culture, traditions, people, his own race, maybe like it's it's written down on paper and made official or something. Like, I mean, that could be what I can think of, but
This sounds
like
more
I
like a
said,
nation, in my opinion,
like
rather
nation,
than
country.
necessarily a state.
Yeah, well, like I said, I didn't think about that, and I don't know if that's very necessary. But the point is, there were wars before they were states. That's the point. I mean, if you don't believe me, you can ask some AI or something, but I'm telling the truth.
Zulu, you're back.
So I would say.
Dying. Oh, sorry.
Oh no. I would just say, the Ancap definition would be a state is an institution that claims a territorial monopoly over the legitimate use of like coercion, right? So I'm just providing you our definition of a state. Would you agree with that? Ask Ancap.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Or both of you.
Well, like I said, I didn't really think about that. I guess for the sake of the argument, I will agree on your definition. But if we take out the warlords, they are still the tribes, right, who fight each other. And I mean, it could be these tribes can be very large, and it could be easily in the thousands, right? And if a battle or some, let's say, war happens between them, it would be a war, like, still, even though we don't have warlords in that place on that second. I still don't agree that it's necessarily for a warlord to be a person who leads a state, because, I mean, it doesn't have a currency, right?
Well, in order for us to accept that, we're going to have to basically accept that these tribal wars that are taking place with thousands of participants are taking place such that every participant is participating in it voluntarily. But the thing is, the core problem here is it wouldn't matter, because if we agree with you that some specific war that takes place such that every participant is voluntarily participating in it, which, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around a war being voluntary. I mean, if you have a place where it's like, hey, we all agree to meet at this place, we're going to duke it out, and there's the rules, and it's all consensual. But most of the time, as I understand it, tribal wars have always been not consensual for at least one party, right? But even in terms of the the organization of one of these tribes, the idea that, well, there's no statism happening here because there's no centralized authority coercing these people into doing these violent acts. If we accept that, it wouldn't even matter, because you're still going to have, okay, well, then that's just a completely voluntary event that's taking place. And if it is true that these coercions are taking place, then it's obviously, in order for the coercion to be taking place, we're talking about a centralized monopoly on the use of violence that's moving this tribe into these violent acts. Zulu, you're back. I want to throw this back to you, because the reason we're talking about this is because of what Zulu was saying with you, where the idea, you were saying, well, all these inventions only happened because of the monarch, and we were saying, well, all of these wars only happen because states exist, and you were saying, no, all the wars before the state, they were completely voluntary things that happened. They did really happen, and there was no state involved in them. So we can take a step back from the war thing, and I want Zulu to have control again of trying to talk about the invention problem. Sorry for such a fruitless rabbit hole that we went down there, Zulu.
No worries about it. So yeah, I just kind of want like a clear picture on how you think that all of these innovations are because of the state rather than in spite of the state, when they weren't being centrally planned. The state, as in our viewpoint, the state's kind of like a parasite. The state is like a criminal gang that is parasitizing upon the productive capacity of people. And that viewpoint entirely lines up with the history of what happened in the Middle Ages. which I'm somewhat familiar with. I'm not an expert, but I'm somewhat familiar with it. Like, what is your take on that, monarchist?
On what exactly? What?
That these innovations that we see in like engineering, in
Yeah.
stoneworking, in
Mhm.
all sorts of different areas,
Yeah.
that they are being done by independent private people rather than being centrally planned by the state, where the state says, try and quench your metal in these sorts of ways instead of that.
Well,
It wasn't really done by that. It was just blacksmiths figured it out over time. They innovated, right? And then
yeah,
that's how they
but
discovered things like steel.
I mean, some of them work for the state, right?
Yeah,
You
so they
agree
get
on
paid
that?
by the state. Doesn't
Okay,
mean they're enslaved by
nice.
the state.
Okay,
They
good. Some of
sometimes
them,
some blacksmiths might be hired by the states for certain contracts. They might the state might come along and say, "Hey, we need like
yeah,
100
yeah,
horseshoes off of you.
yeah,
Can
yeah.
you give me
Okay,
100
so
horseshoes?" He's like, "Yeah, give
if
me
I
this much money,
can,
I can give you 100 horseshoes."
yeah,
Shit like
good.
that. It was
So
like
can I just,
contracts with the state. It wasn't the state essentially planning it. Gazar, your mic is muted.
yeah, mute
That's
yourself,
ironic.
dude.
That's
Oh my
ironic.
god.
Monarchist, if you're going to complain about being muted, you got to stop interrupting, okay? But Zulu's going to try to answer your question here so you can answer.
Okay, but then I would wish that he doesn't interrupt me because I was saying something.
All right. Well, he
So
was talking first, so do you want to answer? Zulu, how about this? We'll give you the opportunity to just sort of give the spark notes on what you just said and give Monarchist the opportunity to listen and respond.
okay, so can
Yeah,
I respond now?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So, what I'm saying here is that these innovations, they're fundamentally not being centrally planned. Now, these great artisans and craftsmen and engineers and so on and so forth, they often would do contracts with like local lords or perhaps even with the king himself if they were fortunate enough for that type of work. But that doesn't mean that it's being centrally planned.
Can I answer now?
Yep.
Okay. Now, like I said, some people work for the state, and because the state is the one paying them, they would many times invent things that would show the state that the innovation, like for example, craftsman invents something because he's working for the state, right? And he invents something, so he maybe gets more money, or he can show that to the state or something. And but he's not a private person because he alone wouldn't have anything from that. He's getting paid by the state, right? And so he would win more money, or he would get something for it if he would invent something. Meanwhile, he works for the state. So a private person. Hey, don't let me finish. You gotta let me finish. So if you do not look, now I forgot what I was gonna say. But
So
yeah, okay, talk.
this really doesn't strike me as being the actual way things generally went. So, for instance, the innovations in metallurgy we see in the Middle Ages, it was generally just blacksmiths would experiment on their own. The state isn't saying experiment in this way and that way and that other way. They're not enslaved by the state in their capacity as an experimenter. They are just doing experimenting on how do they make better metals for their blacksmithing, and that's how they invented spring steel, for instance. This is not directed by the state. To the extent that somebody is being actually directed by the state, they're not innovative. It's the extent that they're not being directed by the state that they're innovative.
Well, some, they were scholars too, right? Who worked for the state, and
Well,
I mean, so these scholars, religion and state was very together working back then. So you see, these scholars worked more or less for the state.
the church.
Wait,
No, the
can I
church.
just finish? Can I finish?
No. Here,
Why?
this is Zulu. I'm begging you, for my sake, and at the cost of the audience. I just want. Can you just ask this gentleman for us? Okay, the state hires a scholar to invent something, and the scholar invents the thing. But by virtue of the fact that the scholar invents it, that means necessarily he could have been doing something else with his time. How do you know that? This gets back to that core thing that Zulu's asking, but how do we know it's because of the state and not in spite of the state? How do you know that the invention that we get because the state intervened, how are you determining that it's not a waste, that it's not that what would have been invented instead wouldn't have been better? How do you know? You're not muted.
I think he ran away.
Who, me?
No, not you. I think Zulu.
No, he
No,
asked
I'm
the
asking
question
you.
for Zulu.
You fool!
Okay, but well, if I get muted the whole time, I mean, didn't you speak to
weren't
Zulu?
muted.
You're not muted.
You've not been muted for the whole time.
Yeah, you muted me before that. So wait, I didn't even listen because he was talking. I thought he was talking to Zulu.
Okay, so if I could summarize Galazar's question, he's
mhm.
saying, imagine there is this scholar who is contracted by the state to invent something, right? They say, we
Yeah.
want this new invention, whatever it would be. Then presumably that scholar could have had his time freed up to do something else instead of doing that line of work. And how do you know that that invention that could have happened wouldn't have been better than the invention that did happen?
But yeah, well, so this person, this scholar, did go and learn to be a scholar by free will, right? His own, what do you call it? What's the word? He did it by himself, right? Independently. He went to the state or something and said, yeah, I'm going to work for you. So he agreed on it to work for the state. And because of this, the state, of course, like, let's say, bought him as a worker and paid him and gave him a place to work and so on, so he can work better than he can work privately or alone, because state has not just that, but sometimes the state gives food and other advantages, right, for their workers in some specific areas. And so it was sometimes easier for the hired scholar to invent something, because it just was made easier by the state. So this scholar can invent it something easier, right? So that's the point what I'm trying to make. Just states are making life easier in many many ways. But before that, it's very late in Germany, so can we just do it a bit quicker, I would say?
Well, you're free to
Because
leave whenever you like, but I want
Well-
Zulu to continue. I'm just
well,
answering
I
that
don't
question.
want you to say afterwards like he ran away or something.
Well, we won't. You're completely free to leave whenever you want.
Okay. Okay, then. You can go on.
So yeah, I think fundamentally, I mean, still, this is not being centrally directed by the state.
May I add something?
Sure.
So, like, let's say we have two parties. We have someone who found a cave and found a bunch of metals and decides to mine away. He's a miner. He's an expert in this. And we have another individual who is a blacksmith, right? And he requires these metals, right? So and obviously the blacksmith would then go just directly to the miner and be like, hey, I want X amount of resources that you got from this mine, and I'll give you whatever in exchange for it. Can you explain to me why there would need to be any type of intermediary force in this exchange, and how this would necessarily make it more productive than them just voluntarily exchanging these resources?
Because, well, I didn't, whatever. So because these individuals just do the price between each other, and like for example, the miner gives the blacksmith his materials for like $100, and the
It
blacksmith
could be
buys it.
anything. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
mean to cut you off. But
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, sure.
yeah, he's respectful. Yeah, so um, this blacksmith buys these materials for $100, and he so the thing is, both just get what they want, but if it would be a state in there involved, then the state maybe would get $10, so there would be a win-win for three sides, or a bit less win for the blacksmith or the
Why
miner.
does the
But
state
in
deserve
but can
that
I
little portion?
finish?
Okay, yeah, sure. Sorry, I
Thank you.
apologize.
So and because the state gets some money from there for free, they can do stuff which would normally be not for free, which normally these private owners would normally need to do with their own money. And you see it's so much harder that few private uh, owners just gather up and say, yeah, we all gonna give this and that much money to this and that to this and that, and we're gonna organize ourselves. I mean, that's very hard, as you know. Masses can organize themselves very hardly. So the state just takes this money from everybody and decides, like a head of a body, like everybody needs a head. So the state decides that for the people, and because the state is above the people and seeing stuff which the subjective humans cannot see, the state decides we need a school here, there, for this, maybe this price for with these materials maybe. And so yeah, that's the answer for me. From me.
Zulu, I'd like if you want to jump in there.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm still not seeing how the state is actually causing innovation here. It seems to me all of the innovation in the Middle Ages was driven by, well, the extent that people were free to act and choose and do things on their own, and that the state is only a hindrance to that innovation. And pointing out that the state did exist, that doesn't really grant us a whole lot of clarity here.
Okay, so I just answered to these questions I'm getting asked, but you go back to the invention stuff. But Flopper asked me something, I just answered to that. I give an answer to
Can you
this.
answer to this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that too. So, but I answered it actually many times. So, well, I can say it again. The state has power to make lives easier for some individuals who are smart, who are smarter, and it maybe exchanges this by making the lives of others harder. But by making the lives easier for some individuals who are smart, these individuals can make these innovations, these inventions, and for these people who weren't very smart at school, they are the ones who most likely are working, right? So state sometimes makes the lives of these workers harder to make the lives of the smarter ones who can or are more likely to invent something easier.
So
So
I
you're
think this is, hold on.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think this is a completely incorrect interpretation of the history. It wasn't like the state was going out there and going, "Oh, this guy is going to be more innovative. That guy not so much. So let's put our thumb on the scale here. Make the more innovative guy have a better life, and the less innovative guy a worse life." That's really not what happened at all. What happened was people would get into various different professions.
Mhm.
Sometimes those people would innovate in those professions. Sometimes the state would hire them for certain specific tasks. But that's not the state centrally planning who they think is going to be more innovative. And it really wasn't the state sending people off to school. The state didn't send people off to school in this period. Right? That's just absolutely not at all what happened. If you were
Okay.
very wealthy, perhaps you could afford to go to a university or study in some like monastery or something. I don't know. But it wasn't the state deciding this person's going to be more innovative than this other person. Let's help out the more innovative one. That's absolutely not what occurred.
Okay. So you agree state didn't involve in education, or
It really, it was not a
Well-
massive state-directed project. Like if you're thinking about the current public schools we have, that
Yeah,
was
well-
really not a thing.
okay? Well, you are wrong.
You think they were
Back
public
then?
school? You
No,
think back in the
not-
day, like everybody would go, okay, little Jimmy, go off to school and learn about, this. No, they'd work on the fucking farm. They'd work when they were
So-
kids.
Okay, let me just answer to that. Well, you are wrong because back then, when you look at the state or the empire of the Aztecs, for instance, the Aztecs had the state of the Aztecs cared about education, and even the lowest guy, even the lowest peasant in the school, who was very productive and smart, the state would pay for the education for that person, and that's because the king said so. That's because the king thought that this would be smart. And
Well, I don't know
Uh,
anything about the Aztecs. Was this also the case in Europe?
well, this was sometimes in some areas the case. For example, in the Ottoman
No.
Empire. Okay, so can you prove that it wasn't nowhere in Europe the case?
In Europe, it was not the thing where the state would be paying for little peasant children to go off to school. That is
Okay.
absolutely not the case.
Should we want
100% not
to?
the case.
Okay, so nowhere in Europe the state paid for the education of peasant children. Is that your claim?
My claim is that was not the general practice. I don't care if you find one particular example where a local lord was,
Okay, now
wow, this
changes.
peasant child is so great, I'm going to pay for them to get an education. That is not the general practice. The general practice is that those kids would be working for their parents.
Okay, so you just backed up there. Okay, nice.
I never
Uh,
said 100% of peasant children always work for their parents. I never said that.
You-
So I didn't
you
back away
said-
from anything.
You said Europe. It had nowhere that case, but yeah, okay.
He
No,
said nowhere
but,
is it the general practice, right?
I
You
don't
you
think that-
so no. Let's just say it's an English second language problem. Okay, Zulu didn't say that. He said you're laughing at something that's recorded and being watched by so many people.
Yeah.
He said it's not a general practice. Now, because you're English second language, I'll explain. Zulu is not making the claim general practice does not mean it's never happened.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know that.
Okay. Oh, you know that.
But I don't think that he said general practice. He just said there was
Floppa,
that
did you hear
practice
him say
wasn't-
general practice?
Dude, I'm so kind of lost in this discussion. I don't remember him saying personally general practice, but it was
Yeah.
if he didn't specifically say that, I'm pretty sure it was like more implied. It was pretty implicit. Like obvious, I don't think he would have logically made the claim that this couldn't have possibly metaphysically ever happened, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, so
Yeah,
to be
well,
abundantly
agree.
clear then, my claim is that in Europe in the Middle Ages, which is the period I know about, I don't know anything about the Aztecs, my claim is that generally it was not the case that children would be going to school. It was generally the case that they would be working for their parents. Now, if they're a child of a nobleman, then perhaps they'd be educated and learn how to read and write, and they'd start studying various
Mhm.
textbooks and whatnot. But that was a very rare thing.
Okay, but I don't know why you go to Europe if states in other parts of the earth
I just don't know anything
did
about the
do it.
Aztecs. But fundamentally, if this didn't happen in Europe, right, then your point does not stand that the state is doing this central planning of deciding this individual is going to be great for us, this individual not so much, so we're going to make life easier for this individual. Your point no longer stands because Europe still
No.
did have massive innovations, clearly, because we out-innovated the Aztecs.
No, that's not the case actually. Back
The
then,
Aztecs were more technologically advanced than Europeans when it came to the Columbian exchange.
Well, they were at the same height, I would say.
Same level. So the Aztecs actually came
Yeah.
to Europe rather than the other way around.
No, the Aztecs
Oh, so
weren't
the Aztecs were
greedy.
less
No,
technologically
can I
advanced.
just finish? So these Aztecs weren't
Aztecs-
greedy. For example, guys, can I just finish? Oh my God, guys,
Yeah,
is
I
this
just want to
like
know,
a
did the Aztecs
kindergarten or
bring
yeah?
steel?
So look, the Aztecs, for example, thanks to the Aztecs, we have many fruits which the
Aztecs
Europeans,
invented those fruits.
no, well, not invented, but
Okay, so
thanks
what
to
are the
them
Aztec
we.
innovations over Europe?
Okay, well, agriculture.
So Europe didn't have agriculture at the time.
We had, but
Okay,
it
so
was
not that.
the
So
Aztecs
what
had
was
it better.
In what
They were
way?
better doing agriculture.
Well, I'm not a historian, but it was like that. You can look it up if you wish.
In
The
what way was it
Aztecs had. Okay, can I just go on? Like, look, the Aztecs had better agriculture. They had better city building. For example, the Aztecs had one of the actually the bigger states, bigger cities than the Europeans back then. They even built a city, Tenochtitlan, which was built on a sea, on a lake actually. Sorry, it was built on a lake,
So sort of like
and it was
Venice.
bigger than the European
Kinda
city.
like
So my
Venice.
point is,
Hold on. So kind of like Venice.
kind of, but it was like in the middle of.
Except Venice was actually built on a sea.
Funny. Well, one is sea and one is lake, but still both are water.
I'm
But
not seeing how the Aztecs are way more innovative. Europeans invented spring steel. We invented firearms. We invented the massive ships you need to get across the Atlantic Ocean. I
yeah,
really do not think the Aztecs were more technologically advanced than the Europeans.
yeah.
The Columbian
I
exchange.
didn't say they were more advanced. I said they
actually
were.
did.
No, I actually
Because
said they were on the
took up a
same level.
Specifically, you took up a bugbear when I said that the Europeans out-innovated the Aztecs. It's very
Yeah.
clear that they did.
And I said no.
How so?
I just explained because these Aztecs had many stuff which the Europeans back then didn't had, like
agriculture, because we figured that out.
Agriculture, science, math.
What was so advanced out in the mathematics? Can you please tell me that? Because do you know
Well,
how much mathematics is required to build a
You
tread?
know, okay,
whole
yeah,
bunch of
I will
mathematics.
tell you. I will tell you. So the Aztecs, for example, are one of the first ones, or the Mayas, I think, one of them. But I think the Aztecs had it too. Were one of the first ones who invented a symbol for zero. So
When did they do
that's
that?
one thing. Sorry.
When did they do that?
Well, I don't know, but they did it before the Europeans. That's the fact. So, but I don't know why you're going off topic because like what I'm saying is
This is not off
in
topic.
other areas of
Because you were saying that the Aztecs are more innovative than Europe, and you have to maintain this, because otherwise
Okay,
your
yeah,
state schooling and
okay.
stuff kind of breaks down.
So okay, I will. So the Aztecs are more innovative because the Aztecs had so they began having a state so much later on in history, and these people, these Aztecs, came like thousands, I think 16,000 years later to the Americas. So these Europeans had so much more time to get innovation and innovate and have more
I think
inventions
actually
and
all
stuff.
humans had the
So
same amount of time. Unless you're suggesting the Aztecs like evolved completely separately out of like jungle monkey.
He just
No, like,
cuts me off. Like,
Okay, well here, I'm going to jump in
He
there,
just cuts me
Monarchist.
off,
I just want to help you, Zulu. This is just a information dump because our guest said you can look it up. So I don't profess to have any expertise, so I did a quick Google search. I thought that would be fair since we were told to look this up. So it looks like the summary is the Aztecs had a single advantage that was their chinampas. That's the farming, the agricultural system they had.
Mhm.
That actually resulted from a very unique situation they had in their climate and their environment because of the way that their waterways were fertile and all that sort of stuff, and they couldn't easily farm all of the sheer cliff faces. So that's sort of like a result of their situation, let's say. In every other category that the historians quantify, Europe is the obvious winner, including information and media due to things like the printing press and the exchange of scientific knowledge, which wasn't happening in the Aztec culture. Military and warfare, Europe had like vastly better in every quantifiable way strategy and weapons and technologies. Navigation and travel, Europe absolutely crushes them in everything. It's all of their transoceanic navigation, all of their compasses and all those things. All that technology was far superior for Europe. And mechanical clocks were an example of how the Europeans were vastly superior than the Aztecs in time and math. Now, I'm only bringing this up because you invited us to look up, and I'm not an expert. So this seems to be what the expert consensus is.
Well,
Zulu, sorry for the interruption. I want to hand it back.
Okay, can I maybe answer to that?
Sure.
So you said only that, but that's not the case. These Aztecs were so much healthier and had better medicine and better education, and the whole society was just better than the European ones.
Well, then why didn't the historians that Galzer looked up just now bring that up?
Yeah. Well, I just
like
looked it up
what
too.
specifically was better about their medicine, for instance?
Well, the Aztec doctors used hundreds of medical plants to treat wounds, and for example, like to cure illnesses efficiently, more efficient.
Well, so does the Europeans.
Yeah, but the Aztecs did it more and better.
In what way did they do it better?
We just cuts me off the whole time. Is this guy for real?
You're not answering. In what way did they do it better? You said, well, they used hundreds of plants. It's like, oh yeah, goddamn, the Europeans did as well.
Okay, so they have used, like, you asking me how are their medicine better? Mm-hmm. I'm telling you they used more plants.
Specifically, how is their medical technology better? Like, I'm sure there are some medicinal herbs in South America that you can't find in Europe, and vice versa, right? I'm sure that's the case. But how specifically is their medical technology better? Like, did they develop germ theory? For instance, if they developed germ theory and they were doing hand washing and stuff like that, then yeah, that would be a genuine advantage over the Europeans. But was that the case?
The Aztecs were very hygienic. They cleaned themselves with water twice a day. They bathed twice a day.
Well, the Europeans also cleaned themselves a whole lot.
It's a common myth that the Europeans were dirty. That's not true.
Right. No, they hated bad smell. They were very, very, very cleansing. Right. If they thought somebody smelled bad, they thought that person was bringing disease, because that's what they thought was the carrier of disease.
Yeah. So they invented perfume because they were so stinky, and to prevent. Yeah, really. That's why it's called eau toilette, right? That's why these perfumes. They write.
Invented it.
Very funny. So no, because these Aztecs, look, these Europeans, when there was the plague, most Europeans bathed like twice a month or something, so because they thought bathing would open up these little pockets or something in your skin, so bacteria can go into these.
I'll tell you something else the Europeans did during the plague is they invented a rudimentary form of face masks.
Yeah.
That actually did help slow down the spread of plague. They thought it was because it prevented the smell from getting in. That's not quite true. But it did actually slow it down. Did the Aztecs have that?
By accident, yeah. The Aztecs had masks.
Well, yeah, most inventions are by accident.
Yeah, but they didn't Yeah, yeah, that's the case, but they didn't know that it helped. Like, I mean, that's
Well,
not
they didn't
even
know
funny.
why it helped, but it did help, and they
Yeah,
knew
but
that it helped.
I
They
mean,
didn't
that
understand
doesn't
the
have to do
cause and effect.
anything that they are smarter or something. That was just
So hold
by
on, did the
accident. I
Aztecs
mean,
discover germ theory?
Zulu, can you
I don't know what that
recontextualize
is.
for us right quick why we're talking about the Aztecs again, just so
Yeah.
everyone doesn't have a
So-
difficult time keeping up?
So this goes back to he was saying how well the state was doing this sort of central planning thing where it would make somebody's life easier at the expense of somebody else, and they were trying to breed these innovative individuals. And I was saying that's absolutely not the case, at least not in Europe. There was not this whole state schooling thing. And our caller here brought up the Aztecs, and he said, well, actually, in the Aztec Empire, they had a bunch of state schooling, and so now he's got to maintain that the Aztecs were in fact more innovative than Europe. Otherwise, his entire case falls apart. That's why we're talking about the Aztec Empire.
Mm-hmm. So, can I go on?
Yeah, just tell me how the Aztecs were
Okay.
more innovative in medicine or somewhere else if you're going to drop the
Okay,
medicine.
so overall, these Aztecs are more innovative because they did, in a small time, they did many things that the Europeans back then didn't do. And you see, these Europeans were in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, and these Aztecs went to the Americas and created a state, like, I think, like 1,000 years ago, maybe not, like not even 1,000 years. It was like 700 years ago or something, and they managed to create such a massive city without all of these technologies which the Europeans had, but still managed to
They
make it
were
the
less
biggest city.
technologically advanced.
Maybe we're conflating a little like sophistication with like rate of innovation. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
there's
guys,
two.
I'm sorry. Wait, I just had to mute myself because, well, it's late, so I had to just mute myself for a second. Well, I would like to go on just a little bit more to that, but after that, I really need to go because it's very late in Germany. So
Certainly. So let's
yeah.
just close it on this important note then, because I don't think it's too important that we continue to argue about the Aztecs' level of
Yeah.
technological advancement. Even if the Aztecs were more innovative, and even if the Aztecs did have this, the king was raising up the poor children through his own personal funds story, which nobody on this panel believes, I'm pretty sure. But let's say that's true. Even if the Aztecs are more innovative,
Yeah.
and they were doing this thing that you said they were doing, that that really raises the question: how do you know that the innovations were happening because of this practice and not in spite of it? Now, I have to stop you because it's been over an hour now where you answer this question by repeating yourself. And now it's time to get serious because you're leaving. I need to tell you, repeating yourself isn't an answer to the question. Pointing out that these two things happened next to each other is not proving that one caused the other. We're asking you to connect the fact that the state existed and innovation happened. We're asking you to show how you're reasoning that the innovation was because of the state and not in spite of it.
Okay, perfect. So I can prove that by showing that, like, in the very beginning, like I said, there is no provable invention which wasn't thanks to monarchistic elements, and monarchistic elements are very like centralized and stateful because it centralizes the humans at one human being. And because of this, and because you cannot prove any invention which wasn't thanks to these monarchistic elements or these centralization elements, because you cannot prove that, and because I can prove that many areas on the earth where the people didn't have these innovations, they got it thanks to governments, thanks to countries and states. And yeah, because you just can't prove otherwise, I think I proved my point here.
So you're saying that the inventions
What-
took place where there was a state. That's the fallacy that I'm telling you about. The fact that they coincided does not establish a causal relationship.
so-
Your response is not addressing the fallacious inference that you're drawing.
Before
so
you
can-
leave, oh sorry,
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
let you finish.
No. Well, Flopper, you can speak because you're respectful, not like the other guys here.
I was just gonna say before you leave,
Yeah.
if we go back to that miner and blacksmith example, would you say, just I guess very simply, isn't the state taking a portion of that transaction necessarily limiting the potential innovation of the blacksmith, because he has less resources now to use for further innovation? Would you say that is true or no?
Well, he still has the same amount of resources, right? Because
No, because the state, you said, came in and took some portion of it, right? Of his
Yeah.
resources, or each person's.
well, he did that because by that the state has done something which humans, masses, cannot do by themselves. He did a favor for the humans because it just made it easier to get lots of money from many people by not having to necessarily have the people all gather up and talk about this and have a discussion about it and maybe a fight about it. The state just says
I'm just
everybody gives his portion, and with that, we have this hospital, we have this school, and everybody helped with it. Yeah, Flopper?
sorry, I'm just asking, like, on a very individual level. You would have to agree that the state would necessarily limit that individual's capacity for innovation because now he has less resources, right? Not talking like the bigger picture, but like if I took something from you, I am necessarily limiting what you can do with now the rest of the resources you have, right?
Yeah, true. So in that case,
Okay.
the blacksmith just has to get more innovative to use it more better, right? To use this less elements to, like, you just proved my point. Like this person.
I think you proved my point, but sorry, I'll let you
no.
finish.
Yeah,
Well,
let me just finish.
parasites. I'm stealing this from a commenter, but a commenter messaged that
But can I just
parasites are
finish?
a good thing because if you have a parasite in you, you have to work harder to make up for the nutrients that it's stealing from you, right? So it's a good thing.
Well, no, but well, it helps you to do inventions. It helps you to get creative, to get rid of these parasites. So this just proves my point that if humans have less, they have to think of a way to use these materials more efficiently, because the blacksmith needs to, maybe he has some what do you call, he has some orders, let's say orders. He must do like 10 swords for the king, and he can just buy iron for 9 swords. So he has to get in, like, creative and inventive to still make somehow 10 swords with a new technology, with a new invention, by using a more cheaper material. And with that, he still needs to, like, do an invention which would still make these swords like durability, like at the
So
same
why wouldn't I
durability
take
and
all of his
how-
stuff? Because then he
Well-
would be maximally innovative, right? If I just took everything he had.
Okay, but I mean, I don't know how that's now the.
I'm just following your premise to its logical conclusion. Like,
Yeah,
if
well-
if taking 10% of what he has makes him more innovative, why
Mhm.
couldn't I take 80% or even 100%? Because now he
because
has less,
after-
and now he has to. Sorry,
Yeah,
continue.
because in that case, the person doesn't have faith in getting it right. He doesn't have, like, he doesn't think, oh well, it's still possible for me to get this orders done, right? So this person this blacksmith, when he just has less than like just 10% less of what he actually had, he can still think like, oh well, I still have the possibility to make these orders to still get the stuff I need to do. But if you take like 100% or 50% of it, he thinks, well, how am I supposed to do that? And then he stops working and goes and maybe cries about it to the king or something. And by
So,
this, I think I have proved my point. And I just want to say something before I go. Well, I debated here 3 anarchists alone, right? For like how long? Half an hour, 40 minutes. Before even my friend was or
it was
went.
2.5 because I was gone. To be fair, just
Okay.
kidding. Thank you for
Well,
coming on, though.
Yeah, no problem. I will come next week too, right? You will have next week Sundays.
No,
Next
next
week
week is
Sunday.
actually an exception for us. We're going to be there's some real life stuff going on, but every other week.
Okay, so the week after next week will be another show, right?
Absolutely.
And one more question: would you ask Ansap just like debate me on Discord privately, or want to talk with me?
I'm always available for chatting. If anyone's watching this for the audience, if you're in our Discord server, there's a link in the description. I'm pretty much always available.
Well, I don't know about chatting because you're very disrespectful in chats, but maybe in voice chats would be better, and it would be much easier for both of us because when you speak, you're getting highly more respectful. I see.
I think that our
Yeah.
audience would really lament missing out on any more of what they were seeing tonight. So I'd be very reluctant to deny them any more of this. But I'm always happy to communicate with anyone who reaches out to me. I don't have you blocked or anything, so feel free to message. But as is customary on our show, we give everybody a last word. So you're leaving. Would you like to wrap up your last word, and we'll move on to the next caller?
Last word. Something for an edit, maybe. No, just so. Okay, last word. Anarchists are just subjective, selfish addicts who are very subjective. That's my last
Let's
word.
go.
You did just complain about us being disrespectful, right? Just on the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's about enough of our monarchist friend for one night. Holy moly, everybody! That's what are we all addicted to? I'll tell you what, guys. I'm addicted to is AI.
Freedom.
I love AI.
Meth.
I don't even I don't even use AI. I just like making people mad. That's not true. I use it a little bit. Look at my thumbnails, guys. I have a super good call queue, but what kind of host would I be if I didn't ask my fellow co-hosts first? You guys good to continue? I don't want to put anything on you guys, especially after that triathlon that we just endured.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's try get like a real short one in, and then maybe move on to EvoCap.
Excellent. All right, I have got a really short one lined up right here.
You didn't even
Major
ask me.
on the line.
I'm just kidding.
Flappa, shut up. EvoCap, not EvoCap. Mage, you're on
Hello.
the line. How are you?
Hello. Hi, I'm doing fine. How are you all?
You're doing well. How can we assist you today? You asked the question, you told us the question, but why don't you just read it off and we'll jump right into it?
I actually just closed my Discord. Can you read what I messaged you?
Yes. Okay. What does anarcho-capitalism offer to people who desire to be irresponsible with their choices? And if nothing, would you deny that there is some power in the popular demand, regardless of its truth, virtue, etc.? I think that's a question to start off with.
Yeah.
Zulu.
Yeah, I think that I don't I can elaborate if needed, but that's I think a short form of yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, please do elaborate. So is basically the idea of the question like, I mean, yeah, you state it.
Yeah. Like the idea is like, what does anarcho-capitalism, or just even let's be more broad, big tent libertarianism offer to people who wish to stay immature and irresponsible?
So it's not going to offer necessarily a whole lot to people who want to be irresponsible, because it's basically going to force them back into reality, where
Mhm.
you've got to be responsible to some degree, or else you're not going to be productive, and that's going to cause problems, and you're going to
Mhm.
piss people off, and so on and so forth. Like, I think a good way of putting it is that the state kind of allows people to maintain a sort of fiction where they can be just drains on society, and that keeps them going. Like, this is absolutely like a divergence from the reality of the situation.
Yeah, but so in broad sense, you would say there's nothing to offer to some of the people who want to stay in the dreamland or whatever, right? That state offers or of some kind that will
Yeah,
probably crash and burn at some
yeah,
point, but regardless.
yeah. They're going to
Uh,
have to come back to reality. Whoop! There goes
okay.
gravity.
But okay, so in that sense, I guess like in a more political like not theory, like not justification, not moral argument, but just like political theory sense, would you not say there should be at least some things offered to people who want, like to stay irresponsible, or because
I would
or
say no.
not like that, but like
I would I would
hmm,
say they should be kind of painted as sort of a villain class, and should be demonized, and like, hey, these people are a drain on your life. They're terrible, and
mhm,
they're going to have to be forced to actually do good things if you
mhm,
follow along with this. There's got to be a demon class for anybody, right? And our demon class classification is actually accurate. These are the people who are making your life worse. These are the people who are, you see these TikToks of, teenagers, they're called, um, uh, doing a wheelie on their bike, riding right up on to somebody and swerving away at the last second. These sorts of
mhm,
drains in society. I don't want them. I don't care for them.
mhm,
They should be forced to become either productive members of society or be banished to the frontiers.
mhm.
That's what should happen.
What I would say, like, wouldn't you say at least that, like, let's consider this. Isn't there a large section of society that is heavily reliant on the dream, like land, whatever promises sold by state actors and whatnot, and many populists, I would just say.
Quite possibly, but the thing is, these people are kind of irrelevant as far as strategy is concerned because they are in dreamland. They're not
Mhm,
doing any sort of movement. They can kind of just be entirely ignored. They're followers, right? They go with the flow. They're not building any sort of unified resistance against
maybe,
this or anything.
but like, isn't there? So, would you deny at least? I like that's the second part of my question. Would you deny that there is any relevant or important power dynamic that they provide just by the mere popularity of being in the dreamland or whatnot, right?
Yeah, I would deny that because they're not originating any ideas. They only, I describe them as inertia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inertia meaning if you've got a big heavy steel ball in front of you, it resists motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to provide some amount of motion to this ball. They're just
Mm-hmm.
resisting that motion, but they're not actually providing any motion themselves. So all we got to do is control the people, be the only people who are providing motion to this ball, and then it goes wherever the hell we want it to.
What
We should
would it
also.
be?
Oh,
Okay, go
sorry.
ahead. Say it. Yeah, no,
Oh,
Mhm.
I was just gonna say we should also look at what happens if we do the opposite. What happens if we actually provide something to the people that are being
Mhm.
immature and responsible? Would you say that this is a good incentive for them to now not be immature and responsible?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not sure. I am mainly asking because it's like in a sense of like in a misanthropic sense, right? I'm more asking this in a sense of like I am kind of disappointed in humans that they choose to be the way they are, but
Get on board.
yeah, but
It's worth noting on that point, like just to bounce off what Flop is saying, a lot of these people are lazy, good for nothings because the state does incentivize that type of activity through the welfare state, right? So you wouldn't expect as much of it if we were living in a productive capitalist society.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, I understand the inertia point, but I don't think that's exactly true potentially. Like, because like, not 100%. I would say, wouldn't you, like, my argument, I guess, counter argument would probably be there probably is something to offering people some tangible benefit that they can get for no reason, right? Like, if, like, consider this, right? Anarcho-capitalism is probably better for us, and, like, when I say us, like any given person broadly. But if if I just had to choose for no other reason, and I was complete, like, I got a wish for anything, it probably would be more beneficial for me to have, like, let's say 30% of society enslaved to my desire, right? Maybe the rest can be an Ancap, and, like, whatever the 30% contribute, whatever marginal utility the 30% of society could provide to genuine anarcho-capitalism.
So you want to be the king of the wastelands?
No. I'm just saying, like, in that sense, probably there could be some, like, marginal utility calculation a person like that, for not me but someone else, could make. Oh, I want to be irresponsible. Like, I was making an analogy in the sense of there could be a society better for even an Ancap, where they are king of a few dozen people, right? Instead of, like, completely, free people. But, like, that isn't relevant broadly
So,
to philosophy, right?
actually, the best situation is that everybody's free, and then you
Mhm.
have comparative advantage and all these things, and everybody's able to innovate. It's
Sure,
a
but
worse situation even for you as the slave owner, if there are slaves.
yeah, true, I agree. But, like, that is more of a thing, like, if you consider the broad society, right? Like, I wouldn't say that is true of every individual slave owner, right? I would say, if you, whatever marginal utility, the specialization of the slaves that could be possible, right? It could be higher for you in an individual case, if you're the slave master, for, let's say, I don't know, 20 people just serve your interest for no other reason, right? That could be.
So I would say this
Hmm.
actually limits the types of innovations you're going to consider. It limits your own well-being. It limits your own productivity and everything. Like, and this is explored in the objectivist ethics, of course, where if you are the ruler of people,
Mhm.
that actually, it doesn't allow you to fulfill your full potential. You can't have full proper self-esteem if you're in that position.
Why not?
So if you are controlling these other people,
Mhm.
you're basically trying to cheat reality there, to put it simply. I can't
Mhm.
give you the full treatment of this because I can't remember it fully myself.
That's fine. That's fine.
But I think the idea would be basically you're trying to cheat reality. You're trying to pretend like you can actually, direct the minds of others, which is, a denial of your own individual autonomy on some level. And whenever you're trying to cheat reality to gain a value like this, it necessarily, reality comes around and bites you in the ass, as we see with, the South was less economically developed than the North in America. It just
Mhm.
was like that. That was a bad situation for them that they got
Mhm.
into
Mhm.
because of their choice to keep slaves.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting. Yeah, that makes some sense. Okay. But on the going back to the more main point I was trying to make with um the second part of my question, which was, would you, like, deny there's some popularity advantage and whatnot? I think it's kind of dismissive to suggest that everyone who is such that they would desire to be, unfree to an extent, or, like, whatever unfreedom that they would desire, um for, I don't know, being immature reasons, um don't have any discrimination as far as what they would back, right? Like they don't have any agency even in what they like. They're not to suggest they're completely sheepish and not just self-interested about what is it, being immature, seems a bit narrow-sighted to me. That's all I was going to say.
So I think it just actually
Hmm.
lines up with when you look at the demographics of the population.
Hmm.
When you look at how many people study philosophy, come up with new ideas, well, it's not a whole lot, and this entirely lines up with, you know, IQ isn't a perfect metric or anything. Like
Mhm.
it's limited in its capacities, and you know, it's not measuring general intelligence. It approaches it, but it's not quite measuring it.
Sure.
But you do see that these innovations, they tend to come from the right tail of the IQ graph, which is not many people in the population, right? So the rest of them, you know, what are like the sub 90s doing? Where are they getting their ideas from? Well, they're not originating the ideas themselves. They're just kind of, you know, banging a couple sticks together, looking at what smart people are saying and trying to emulate what those smart people are saying. And like you see this very clearly with like the rise of like the low IQ anti-Semites.
Hmm.
Like people like Jake Shields and whatnot. They just tried to kind of emulate what they saw the smart people saying. They saw the smart people were having these discussions. You know, I think even the high IQ anti-Semites are wrong, to be clear.
Hmm.
But they're just kind of, it's this cargo cult mentality, right? I described in the Dave Smith video. They just
Mhm.
try and cargo cult what the intelligent conversations are happening. They're entirely downstream of those conversations. They don't really add anything.
Is it like completely undiscriminatory about that though? Like that's my point with that. Like, is that cargo cult formed around anything? And if you throw them anything that sounds intelligible, would they form a cargo cult around it?
So
Or
they
is
would
there
have
some discrimination?
they're using the social compatibility filter. I can't remember the exact name for it, but basically social acceptability, I think it is. If they think it is the socially acceptable thing, if they think it is like you know the in idea, then they're going to try and cargo cult it.
Mhm.
If they think it's some fringe idea, well, I mean, they don't want to piss off people, you know. If they think it is not where the tide is going, then they're not going to go for it, because they are fundamentally followers. If they think that's where the tide is going, then they're going to try and cargo cult it.
Okay. Well, I can I ask what the other hosts think about my question also?
I'm gonna let that go over to Floppa.
Okay.
Like the general question that you asked initially, which was, what does libertarian offer to people who wish to stay immature and irresponsible? That one.
Yeah, and the follow up, and if nothing, would you what was it?
Yeah,
If
I forgot that one. I didn't catch
if
it.
nothing, if it offers nothing, would you deny that there is some power to the popular will, or like that needs to be considered or whatnot in that regard? Yeah. That like the
So if it
it's a
offers
follow up.
nothing, would I deny that there is power to the popular will that needs to be
Yeah.
considered?
Yeah.
I would, from my understanding, I don't really have like, I haven't thought about this question very much, but I would just say like, most people generally just go along with, you know, kind of whatever structure or society that they already exist in.
Mhm.
You know, it's maybe I just don't personally have too much to offer, or I would have to think about this question more. So I'm sorry that's
No,
unsatisfying.
that's perfectly
But
fine.
it's something for me to consider actually for the future.
Definitely.
I'll jump in. I'll give you an answer, Mage. I think that
Okay.
for such a person who you're describing here, these sort of high time preference layabouts, let's call them, addicts like us three, for example. The problem is that there is such a thing as a person whose time preference is just so high that you can't offer them anything. But I would say that those people are exceedingly rare. So if we take one of these people and we sort of define them And so we know, like, what do they like? They like immediate gratification. They like to work as little as possible and have as much leisure. They probably like to sample from a whole bunch of different pleasures rather than getting, just focusing on one thing, all these kinds of things. Well, all of those, any arrangement of those and all the different variations you can imagine, what could possibly be better for such a person than a world in which scarcity is minimized as much as it possibly could be and aggression is absent? I couldn't imagine a world within the bounds of reality that would be more desirable for that person. Now, that logic is not meant to be absolute and irrefutable. Of course, you can have somebody who is an egregious offender, and no amount of reasoning is going to make them say, well, you know what, like, if I don't drive my car into this crowd just for fun, like, I could live a really long, healthy life and do all these things and travel the world, but like, I'm not thinking that far ahead. I just, like, I really need to do this. That's my priority. Well, we can't account for that, but within reason,
Definitely.
within the people who could be influenced by like the kind of question you're asking me, I think that's what we give them. We give them the only society that can minimize scarcity to the maximum it can be minimized, and we give them the opportunity to experience that minimized scarcity in the absence of conflict. That's the greatest gift that anyone could be given, I think.
Yeah, I get you. Now, I think this. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, on what Ask Ancap was saying, like, we still provide them liberty. We provide them the freedom to associate with whoever. We provide them the access to the wonderful amount of markets that would be available. Like, at the end of the day, it is up to them to decide whether they want to choose just complete destruction and chaos, or, perfectly stable and normal life where they choose to voluntarily associate with the other people who live around them and are also happy to voluntarily associate with them as long as they aren't insane, So
yeah. Galazar, if I may, like, I will say something a little, like, I will change your perspective, like the answer to a particular hypothetical, and then I'll leave it at that if that's fine, and listen to it. So this example will probably not fulfill my later segment because it's a very particular type of person, right? Then that particular type of person probably isn't very popular. But imagine a person who has high time preference, right? Maybe, or maybe, like, let's say, just irresponsible, but they've dug into themselves. They have self-consciousness strongly, and they come to the conclusion that they are like that, right? Like, oh, I've thought through, maybe I did philosophy and I gave up, right? Or whatnot. And my thought is, you know what? I want to be irresponsible. What can you offer me? Would you have anything to say?
Well, what do you
to
mean
that?
exactly? Without getting into the weeds, like, what do you mean irresponsible?
Like, I don't want to be held accountable for my poor decision, let's say in healthcare, right? I decide I can make a mistake about healthcare. I can make a mistake about what I put into my body as food, right? And I want a daddy that will decide that for me.
Is it the case that what they want to be free from the responsibilities for, is it an aggressive thing that they want to be free from or is it just poor choices in their own entrepreneurial decision making? Yeah. So aggression's not like, they're not asking. I want to steal someone's bike and I don't want to have to give it back. No. Yeah. So if you want to do that, you want to be in an Ancap society because scarcity is minimized. So you'll have to do the least amount of work to get the maximum amount of access to the recreational activities you want. And the things that you can do to mitigate the consequences, like, for example, having like, if you're riding a bike, something that mitigates consequences for riding recklessly is a helmet. Well, you'll have to work the least to get the best or the most suitable helmet. Medical care, then medical care will be the cheapest. So that's the kind of society that you would want to live in. I think that should be essentially hands down the case for every possible way that you could. I mean, like, look, if you know a stoner who's like, look, man, I just want to stay home and smoke weed and go skating. That's all they care about.
That's me.
Perfect. Now, and look, he's an Ancap. Right?
Me and the boys.
So, but what could you possibly offer them more than, hey, man, okay, you will have to do the least amount of work to spend the
This is-
most time doing that, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
now you could say, well, why doesn't he just take the government handout? Then he doesn't have to do any work. But that government handout is going to get him so little relative to what he'd be getting in the alternative that it's still a raw deal. It's not even a comparable. It's not even close. The only way to make that make sense is to have their time preference so maximum that they're not willing to do
Yeah,
that
yeah.
minuscule amount of work. And then again, if we are talking about such a person, I think they're essentially unreachable by reason, and we shouldn't
Yeah.
be concerned with them.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I'm able to do all those things like as freely as I want because I had the low time preference of building my channel and you know, making enough money off of it that I just have that
Wish you luck on
availability
that
to me.
continuing.
Thank you.
Mhm.
But also, I think this kind of points to an interesting question. Like, can I would there be communities where I can just basically say, hey, well, would you take care of me? And I guess you could find someone that has like a commune of
Yeah.
some sort that is willing to like just
The
take care
hippie
of your
Ancap.
every need. Yeah, I guess. You know, I don't see why
Yeah.
that wouldn't be possible unless
Yeah.
it's like the slavery thing. Can I
If we keep
voluntarily
if we keep speculating
myself?
about such communities, I'm worried we're going to break the TOS on YouTube. So we
Yeah, I'm
better
sorry.
True.
be
Sorry.
careful.
Um,
Mage, that
thank
was
you
an
all.
interesting question. Thanks so much for reaching out. I think we all enjoyed having
Yeah.
a chat. We
I
definitely
really-
needed a palate cleanser. Let me just say that.
Yeah. I appreciate especially Galzar. Your answer was interesting to me. I always like think of like water like bottle half empty, but you always give me the bottle half full, and I appreciate that.
Excellent.
Have a good stream, everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks so much. If we combine
Adios.
our bottles, then we get an irrefutably full bottle of water, and that's the real key. All right, so we'll move on to our final caller of the night. That was a great palate cleanser from our friend Mage. This is going to be a call with Evolutionary Capitalist. Everybody, put your helmets on. Take your headphones off for at least 30 seconds. Here comes Evolutionary Capitalist. Evo Cap, you're on the line. Can you hear us?
Hey guys.
All right,
Hey,
that was at
Zulu.
1% audio gain, and you still got me.
Hey Zulu, I heard you made a stupid comment. I mean, besides the fact that you guys were talking about, ECP, which is totally nonsensical.
Well,
There's
let's-
nothing
let's-
wrong- there's
What
nothing
it
wrong with
is,
fighting.
evolutionary
That's not what I
calculation problem.
What's that?
It's evolutionary
really what I thought.
calculation problem.
I just wanted to take a free shot at ECP. I wanted to talk about. So you made a comment that, I find that ANCAPs try to equate, with the whole nebulous concept of what capitalism is. I feel like Marx had a better understanding of capitalism than ANCAPs do. Like ANCAPs keep trying to equate profit and productivity with freedom, which I can show that they aren't compatible.
Actually, no. So we're saying that you need freedom to have productivity. We're not saying they're the same thing. Freedom is a prerequisite for productivity.
Yeah. They're kind of equivalent in causal chain.
No. Prerequisite is not
That's
equivalent.
fine. I'll take your language, but I still think that's false. It's totally not. So my concern I represent true capitalism. What I feel is true capitalism, a true market system, evolutionary capitalism, right? Where I take profit and productivity over anything. Right? So you have the burden to
How
show
do you
that.
get productivity?
You allocate decision making efficiently.
So people have to be able to make decisions, yes?
Yes, but not necessarily the owner. Not necessarily the Lockean owner.
Why?
That's
So
tricky
can you
to do.
force somebody to be productive?
No, you don't.
Oh, so people need to be free to be
You don't
productive.
necessarily need to force them, right?
No, can you
all
force them?
All you need to do to
No, but can you
all
force
all
someone to
need
be productive?
to try to take on an aggressive strategy is prevent the libertarian rightful owner from
I just want to know, can you
from
force
carrying out their
somebody
will,
to be
right?
productive?
No, you can stop them from making decisions.
Can you force someone to be productive?
Yes,
How?
like parents with children,
Children can be forced to be
especially
productive.
babies.
I'm not familiar with any babies coming up with big innovations.
No, like let's say a baby wants to drink a cup of Drano.
Okay.
They're expressing their subjective valuation as they want to drink the Drano.
No, I'm
But the
saying
parent
I'm
knows
not saying
objective
where we're going to
value
get a
and wants
productive
to
baby
wants
out
to
of this.
maximize their productivity through their life by preventing them from drinking the Drano.
No, that's not being forced to be productive. That's being forced to not drink Drano.
Yeah, but does stopping them from
Can you
drinking
give
the
me an
Drano
example
maximize
of a
productivity?
situation in at some
Man,
point in
the
history
interruptions come quick.
where somebody has been
quick and
forced to
early.
produce some innovation?
Say that again. But so are you dealing with what my contention here? Like I'm saying that aggression doesn't need to force someone to do anything. Aggression can be when you prevent someone from
Well, the contention I was taking
deciding
up
what to do
umbrage
with
with
their prop.
was that you
deciding
were
what to do
saying
with
that
their
it's
property.
possible to force somebody to be productive. I want to know how it's possible
you're
to
talking
force
about-
somebody to be
What'd
productive.
you say? What'd you say?
The specific contention you had, which I was taking up umbrage with, was that when you said that you can force somebody to be productive. That's what I'm taking issue with.
No.
And I
My
want to
contention is.
that's not
let me
the
clarify. Let me
Is
clarify
that the
because you're
case or not?
misunderstanding. Allow me to clarify. My contention is you can use aggression to maximize productivity.
But can you force somebody to be productive?
Why are you going there? I said you can use aggression.
That's
to
all I want
maximize
to know.
productivity.
Can you force somebody to be productive?
Yes, I gave a counterexample already
How so?
with babies.
How is that forcing the baby to be
Like
to be
you could,
productive?
I assume, like with drug addicts, you could do some type of forceful intervention that they'll agree with later. They might not agree with it in the moment, but later on, it might turn out to be the most
Later on, they would have to be free.
Then
to
you're
do
not
it.
forcing them.
Yeah?
They're voluntarily choosing.
At the moment, they're being
Then
forced.
later
How
on,
is that?
they would
How is
have
that
to,
voluntary?
hold on. Later on, they would have to be free to do
So wait,
something,
hold
right?
on. Flappa kind of
Maybe I'm
insinuated that as long as you can aggress, it's not aggression as long as they agree with it later.
no. Maybe I missed.
Argumentation ethics.
Okay, so
Maybe
later
I
on,
misinterpreted what you're saying
when you
because you're
wean
just
this
fucking
drug
with that.
addict off their drugs, they would have to be free to be productive, right?
No, not if their decision making
force them to be
isn't the
productive?
most efficient.
How could you force them to be productive? Like, could I force
Why are you
Galazar
forcing it to go
be
that way?
productive
I'm
right now?
saying all you need with aggression is to prevent someone from acting. You don't need to force them.
No,
need
but
to
could
force
I,
them from
could
not
I
doing
force
something.
Galazar to be productive right now?
So for instance, my contention is if you remember my property system, is to allocate. You can allocate decision making to like an aggressor, for instance. So
But
what you
could
would
I
consider as an
force
aggressor.
Galazar to be productive?
What was that? Can you let me finish before you like start talking? I can't catch the first part of what you're
I
saying.
don't think you're answering my question. I don't think you're going to answer my question. That's why I keep asking.
No, well, if you stop talking over the last part of my arguments, which is oftentimes the most important part of my argument, I would better understand you.
Is your argument going to be explaining how
Like,
whether
for
I
instance,
could
he's trying to
is
force
your
them
argument
to
going to be
force someone to
explaining
do something. That's
whether I
something
can
very
force
expensive. I'm
Galazar to
talking
be
about
productive?
aggression in general, right? How aggression. So your burden of proof, which I can disprove. Like, there's no burden of proof. There's no such thing as burden of proof, right? I can prove that aggression can
There's no
sometimes
such thing as burden of proof.
maximize productivity. Okay, go ahead.
Could I force Galazar to be productive?
Yes, possibly.
How so?
I don't know. Like
You don't
the truth
know. So
doesn't-
yes,
the
but you
truth
don't know.
doesn't depend on me coming up with a counterexample, Zulu.
So you're sure that I could force Galazar to be productive, but you don't know how.
Yes, you're forcing it to forcing.
Okay,
him
so
to
how
do
are you
something
sure
that-
of that?
That's right now. That's very expensive. I'm talking about aggression in general.
How are
which
you sure of
includes
that fact if you
not
don't know
only
how I would
forcing
do
him
it?
to do something, but preventing him from doing something and replacing his
I just
decision
don't
making
understand
with
how you're
someone else.
sure of
Hold
the
on.
fact
Let's just
people-
this might facilitate things. We agree with
Finally.
you that aggression also involves stopping people from using their property. We don't have to say
Exactly.
that anymore. We don't have to say that anymore because that's not what we're talking about. We agree. We're past that. So
Yeah,
so let's not repeat
not
the agreed
addressing that
upon
part.
premise. Let's move on.
No, that's not moving on. That's ignoring my point. You can't just
Okay.
move on.
But
That's
could I
part of my
force
point.
Galazar to be productive? How
That's the
could I do
main
that?
part of my point. It's because it's more cost effective just to prevent them from doing something
How
than
could I
forcing
force
them to do
Galazar to
something.
be productive?
That's why Zulu wants to go there. He wants to
Do
only
you
address
know
the
how
more
I could force
costly-
Galazar to be
the more
productive?
costly strategy.
Do you know how I could force Galazar to be productive?
Again, the truth doesn't rely on me coming up with a counterexample.
It's really a yes or a no.
What's that?
Yes or no. do you know how I could force Galazar to be productive?
Not at the moment. I'm not. I don't come up
Okay,
with
but you are sure that I could force Galazar to be more productive.
Yeah, like I said, like if he was a drug.
Okay, so how are you sure that I could force him to be more productive?
I don't know.
If you don't know how I would go about doing it?
How could I answer that question without knowing details about Galazar?
Well, you could just say you're not sure that I could force Galazar.
Are you this pathetic? Are you this pathetic?
You could just have said no, that you weren't sure how I could force Galazar. You weren't sure that I could force Galazar.
Is this argumentation ethics? Because I don't want it.
No, what part of this
you have to answer my question, right? I
actually don't have to answer anything. This was my line of questioning.
My problem with what you were saying is that you're trying to equate or say that freedom is a necessary condition for productivity.
Right, and I was trying to draw that out. Like where I could force Galazar to be
owner make all the decisions with
and
property.
we came to that end there.
I'm saying my system can replace what you consider the owner of property with maybe an aggressors who can make a better decision with the property for society, and that is true capitalism, using the price and profit
it seems like you can't actually force
owners by force if necessary.
But it seems like you can't force a person to be productive.
Yeah, you can. Like I already gave counterexamples. I'm not going to give counterexamples of Galazar because I don't know particulars about Galazar. Like for instance, with a baby, like he wants to drink from the drain with the drug addict. Forceful intervention might
forcing that drug addict
could not, but what's that? I just gave
is it not the case that the drug addict would have to be free to be productive?
No, like I just gave a counterexample.
How so?
By forcing him not to do drugs, and then maybe later on he'll sober up and realize my decision was right.
Okay, later on when they sober up, would you be able to force them to be productive?
Yeah, some other situation might arise again with the same type of similar circumstances.
No, I agree. You can force them to no longer take drugs.
Not only that. What I'm concerned. My concern is allocating decision making. That's what an economic system does, right?
You just seem to not be interested in answering.
Here's the difference between. I'm defining the differences, right? I'm trying to define it for you. You're trying to go to specific examples and you're totally avoiding. You're totally avoiding the hard cases. You want to go to the more expensive cases.
This was a case you brought
forcing
up.
Someone to do something. Like, how do you know in the future that we won't have some type of device that can actually control people's will? How do you know that? At the moment, it's expensive. I don't even want to go down this line.
Expensive or impossible?
I don't even want to go down this line.
How specifically would I force that drug dealer, drug addict, to be productive?
Stealing property doesn't involve forcing someone to do something.
Like you're making the positive claim here. You're making the positive claim that I could force this former addict to be productive. How could I do that?
Stopping them from consuming drugs. Or
no, I agree that you can force a person to no longer take drugs.
Look,
how is that forcing them to be productive?
So the general case is taking someone's capital when they've achieved ownership through a lock-in chain.
And that forces them to be productive.
No, it maximizes productivity.
So it doesn't force them to be productive. Okay, so I'm not seeing an example where you can force somebody to be productive.
So in a way, it does force them to be productive.
How so?
It forces them to look for
so they're doing on their own. I'm not doing
advantage with
for them.
Like I'm answering the question. Why is he interrupting before I
because every time you come up with these examples, they're doing on their own. So to the extent that they're free, they can be productive. I agree with that entirely.
No, you can't be free to be inefficient. That's my point.
No, you have to be free to be productive. That's the claim.
You cannot be free to be inefficient. Like you have
to be free to be productive.
There's levels of productivity, Zulu, right? You could be productive, but still cause an economic loss for society. You realize that, right?
I don't care. You have to be free in order to be productive.
So just saying you don't care means you can just ignore my point.
I don't care about engaging in those points right now. So yes, I am ignoring those points. I want to know.
Yeah, when you're back in the corner, you don't want to
if you are not free.
See, again, because value is objective. Your decision making doesn't necessarily maximize.
How specifically are you forcing somebody to be productive?
By forcing them to take on another project, other than the ownership.
Okay, so can I direct somebody's every movements to make sure that they stay online?
You don't need to direct every single piece of movement.
Okay, so they can only be productive to the extent that I'm not micromanaging them. Yes.
You don't need to micromanage for it to be aggression.
Right, and they're only productive to the
Aggression
extent
doesn't
that I'm
need
not
to be constant.
micromanaging them, yes?
Say that again.
So they're only productive, truly productive, on their own, without me micromanaging them, to the extent that I'm not micromanaging
No,
them.
not
Is that
necessarily.
correct?
How is that even
Okay, so I
taking into
can
account what I just
micromanage
said?
productivity in other people.
No, value is objective.
No, I can't. Okay, so you have to be free in order to be productive.
No, you don't.
What's the alternative?
The alternative is trying to maximize productivity by allocating decision making
Can you
properly
explain an unfree
through
person
the
who is
monetary and
productive?
profit and price system.
Can you explain an unfree
So,
person who is productive?
You auction so in an efficient system, you auction off decision making, which is the same thing as auctioning off ownership.
This really does not strike me as an answer. I want to know a person who is not free to produce.
How is that
who
not an answer,
simultaneously
Zulu?
productive. I
How is
want,
that
I
not
want
an
you to
answer?
describe to me the person who is not free to produce, who is simultaneously productive.
How did that answer that question just now? That answered that question just now, if you think about it.
No, it didn't. You said you auction off the fucking shit.
Yeah.
Right? I
so
don't care about. I don't care about
so
when
that's,
you
that's
auction
regardless
things
of
off.
who
I
owns
want
the
you to
piece of
describe to
property.
me the
Like
person
in a
who is
in a
not free
libertarian
to
system,
produce,
right?
who is simultaneously productive. That's what I want you to describe to me.
I didn't hear that.
The person who is not free to produce, I want you to describe how they can be productive.
That's not free to produce. They can, by forcing them to take on another project.
So they're not free to produce,
Look,
and they
look.
can still be productive.
So you own a piece of capital, right? It could be land, it could be a tooling machine, it could be.
I really
don't
just
know,
want to get this very
YouTube
clear.
channel.
You're saying that
Right?
somebody can be
I'm
unfree to
saying
produce,
that if
not
you're
free
not
to
the most
produce,
efficient
and
owner,
simultaneously
you
productive.
should be displaced forcefully if you do not voluntarily
You can
do
have
so.
productive people who are not
And that
free to
forces
produce.
you to be productive
That is your
by
claim.
forcing you to take on to own a different piece of capital that you have the comparative advantage with. Did you hear that?
I just want to be very clear about your claim here. Your claim is that somebody cannot be free to produce and yet still be productive.
No, my claim is that aggression can be maximized productivity. That's my claim. Stop trying to reword my claim.
So you're not. So you're not claiming that. So you are claiming that freedom is a prerequisite for productivity.
He's gone.
There we go.
He left.
I think that's record time.
Bro, what the fuck was that? Do you guys have a beef?
No, we give him some time to call in because his handler told us it helps keep him stable. Basically, I write this out, so I want to have the opportunity to say this to everybody because I think it would be remiss. It would be a shame if I didn't get to. So EvoCap makes a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes, and anyone who's wondering, he's almost definitely going to be back in the comments. So if you guys want the chance to talk to him yourself, you're going to get that opportunity. EvoCap doesn't understand the difference between physical productivity and actual economic value. Now, these are basic things in economics. So I don't like to psychoanalyze people, but we're essentially fighting an uphill battle here with somebody who's very, very interested in his own conclusions that he's come to. Physical productivity, it is entirely true that the person who owns something might not be the most physically productive with it. So, for example, Zulu might own some land that could be used to grow crops, but instead he prefers that he keeps it. He prefers it unused. He likes to go and I don't know, Zulu. You like to sunbathe in the grass. I don't know, something like that. But you're not growing crops. So that's an economic fact. You can be the owner of something and not the most physically productive possessor of the thing. So evolutionary capitalist thesis is that what would be best for society is if we promoted the richest people to always be able to buy things by force. So if you have more money, if Zulu has more money than me, well, let's say he already owns the farm. So let's say I have more money than Zulu. If I go in and I say, well, Zulu, I'm going to buy this farm from you because I've made more money with my farm than you, which is a symptom, or rather it's a natural, necessary thing that happens because I've been productive with my farm and you haven't. So now I've accumulated more resources than you and I can buy this farm from you. The evolutionary capitalist is trying to tell us that's a good thing because I'm the more productive. So now there's an increase in physical productivity because now I'm going to forcibly put that farm into use as a farm. Whereas before it was just a personal suntanning lawn. So this also allegedly solves other problems, such as, well, how do we know farming at all is the thing that should be done? What if there's the potential to strip mine this land? So if the owners of the quarries and the financial interests are saying, well, hey, you know what? Actually, there's some minerals under there. We should be able to buy up both of those farms and then completely strip mine it and take all those minerals, because then this is an even superior use. So he's interested in moving us perpetually towards this perfect evolutionary being, which is essentially the state of affairs in which all of these physical productivities are being maximized. But if you read any of the introductory economic textbooks, what you're going to immediately realize is that these decisions demand, and he'll say this himself, these decisions demand prices so that we can actually make determinations about what's physically productive. Because in actual fact, the fact that Zulu produces less heads of cabbage than I do, or that both of us, our cabbages combined, sell for a lower amount than might be gained if there is a strip mine, all of those questions have to be addressed through the economic calculation process. This is the consequence of us discovering factor prices through free exchanges. It's impossible if you live in a society where you can't have private property, which is precisely what the evolutionary capitalist is proposing. So this is, I don't know, let's say the economic point of view on this. You would want to, according to the evolutionary capitalist, you would want to live in such a society, because in such a society, you would have physical productivity maximized, but you would maximize physical productivity somehow without having prices to guide you. It would just be based on whoever can grow the most, regardless of the price mechanism telling you, well, hey, the mining is more valuable, the cabbages are more valuable, and so on and so forth. Well, that's my economic point of view on that. Zulu and Flappa, I think you both deserve the opportunity. He left in the middle of the conversation, so he has invited some response.
I mean, all I was gonna say is that when he corrected me, I thought what he was saying was that, like, okay, I try to force someone to do something, they deny it, and then later they, like, voluntarily determine that this is, the best, maybe I should get off of drugs or something. So I wasn't making the claim that he stated. I was trying to get a clarification, but that was an entire thing that was quite entertaining, but not necessarily as, let's say, productive as it could have been.
Agreed.
Just as a sort of round off on the exchange that happened there, EvoCamp very much likes to stick to his talking points. And if you try to interrogate a talking point that he hasn't planned out in advance, that's something he just kind of said to back up one of his talking points. If you're trying to interrogate that, he kind of gets very quickly off the rails, and that's exactly what happened right here. Is I asked him a question he wasn't prepared for. He just wanted to come in here with his talking points, and we only talk about his talking points. I asked him, is it possible to be productive without being free? And I just stuck to that. I really didn't have anything on that. We ended up with him thinking that it's possible for somebody to be not free to produce whilst being free to produce. He doesn't have any possible way of explaining that, of course, because it's a contradiction. This is what happens with these types of people who kind of just come up with their own proprietary philosophy, not connected to any real tradition. They end up with kooky ass ideas like that, and they don't have any way of responding to it because they haven't thought of everything that you're going to bring towards them.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to tie it up. Griffin1 asks, is he being the most productive with his body? Great question. I don't know the implications of that. It's almost as if it's not the kind of world that anyone would want to live in. But who could say? At any rate, we have gotten through the call queue. I hope everyone's had a lot of fun today. It's certainly been a banger. Adrian's not with us anymore, but he was earlier, so I want to give a sort of posthumous thank you to Adrian for showing up. The first call, he was maybe actually the second call. I can't remember, but whichever earlier call it was, He was sorely needed. It's been 4 hours. We held excellent viewership the whole time. Very grateful for that, everybody. Zulu and Flappa, I'm going to let you guys both make your final remarks for the episode, and then we'll transition into me turning off the stream. But right quick, before I do that, there's no stream next week, everybody. I apologize, but we will resume as normal the week after next. Zulu.
I guess I'll just go.
Flappa.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for having me on as always. I'm very, very grateful for it. Subscribe to Ask Ancap, subscribe to Zulu, subscribe to my channel, Based If True. And I hope everyone has an awesome day.
Excellent. Thank you. Zulu?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you everybody who came along and watched. Thank you, obviously, for the guest hosts on this episode, and for all the people who called in. I'm just getting very confused by the camera switching around for you.
Yes. Well, it puts the controls behind. There's like an interface that only I can see, and the control to minimize is behind the interface. So I have to guess where the button is. Sorry about that.
Yes. So yeah, thank you for the callers. Thank you especially to those who super chatted, and for all the chatters, the viewers of today's stream, and also there's a Patreon if you want to go check that out. What sorts of benefits can people receive from the Patreon, Galzar?
Well, if you guys are a member of the Patreon, the biggest immediate thing you're going to get is you're going to get behind the scenes access to our special little Discord group where we talk all kinds of very respectful things about our callers. I'm just kidding. No, that's a real benefit, but not what we talk about. Anyway, there's also all kinds of physical materials that you guys can get. We like to make infographics together as a group, and so if you join in, you can have some infographics made for you. Our Discord server actually has a website where we post our infographics, things from books or arguments that people think deserve their own little pamphlet. Now, there's all kinds of things I think everyone should check out in the form of physical rewards. And if you go to the Patreon, you see anything you like, then that's our way of saying thanks so much for helping us keep the lights on.
And, we all know what the best philosophy is, and that's triangleism. We're all secretly triangleists, posing as objectivists and subjectivists.
3 hosts, 1 podcast. This is a triangulist.
There you go.
I should have had us arranged in a triangle for this podcast. That would have been. I really missed. I dropped the ball there.
Everybody have us as a triangle with the guest in the middle when you sort of zap them from each.
Man, I'm so happy that we're ending this podcast with evolutionary capitalist berating us in the comments for not answering the questions from the stream that he suddenly left. If you stay in the stream with us, that increases the probability that we're going to address your claims. Anyhow, thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. As always, thanks so much for joining us. And I'm out of stuff. Thanks.